Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Submission Radio. It's April 26th and it's Anzac Day or Anzac Weekend here in Australia, which is basically our Memorial Day. We want to salute all the Anzacs and all the military people around the world for their time and service to protecting everybody in all the different countries. Really appreciate you guys. Least we forget and we salute you, Cass. Speaking of people in the military, we have none other than Tim Kennedy on the show today, amongst other guests. He's coming back on the program. Always exciting to have Tim Kennedy on Submission Radio.
Yeah, Tim's a really interesting guy to talk to. I can't wait to chat to him. I mean, he called out Lyoto Machida. I believe it was a loser leaves town fight. So I want to find out what that's all about and if he's returning, if he's coming back to MMA. So Tim Kennedy's on the show. We are also joined by two champions. We've got the Bellator middleweight champion, Brendan Bull Halsey. He's going to be fighting Kelvin Grove. So we want to get him on the show. I feel like this guy's a beast and there's not that much known about him. So I want to get him on the show and chat to him, find out his story. And then we have the new lightweight UFC champion, Rafael Dos Anjos. He will be joining us. I believe he will be our last guest for this weekend before we obviously do our breakdown of UFC 186. So it's a pretty packed show. Tim Kennedy up first, then Brandon Bull Halsey, and then Rafael Dos Anjos, and then a breakdown of UFC 186. I can't wait, man.
Yeah, that's right. So much to talk about. And guys, just a reminder, me and Casper and the Submission Radio team are going up to Adelaide for Mark Hunt versus Stipe Miocic. It's going to be a great fight night. It's over there in Adelaide, the first UFC card over in Adelaide. We're going to have lots of content. So if you guys are excited about the card, keep an eye on the channel. And of course, the YouTube channel is youtube.com/Submission Radio AU. We've got a whole bunch of stuff up there, including a technique of the week that comes out every Wednesday. There's also a lot of past interviews that we've done. If you're excited about the Mark Hunt Stipe Miocic fight, guess what? We did some video interviews with the guys a few weeks back in Adelaide. Check those out, where they had a lot to say about the fight. And it's going to be an exciting weekend over there in Adelaide, isn't it, Cass? We're going to have a lot of stuff for the fans.
Yeah, I really can't wait. Well, they're going to have a big media day. There's going to be the weigh-ins, the post-fight interviews, the post-fight press conferences. We will be present and we will have footage of all that kind of stuff. I'm not too sure who they're bringing for the Q&A. Word on the street is Alistair Overeem will be there helping out for UFC Adelaide. Not 100% sure what that means, but who knows? Maybe he'll be the one doing the Q&A, but we will be there. If there's
Setting up the ring. He's going to set up the ring.
He's going to set the ring up. He's going to take the ring apart. He'll drive the truck.
Put the posters up.
He'll be, yeah.
They're bringing him to help. He's going to set up the tables.
He'll be handing out flyers at the front of the arena. He'll wear a mustache, though. People are like, aren't you Alistair Overeem? He'll be like, no, I'm not.
Yeah. Just a little thing here, guys. Casper does a really good Alistair Overeem voice. Don't want to put too many feathers in your cap, Cass, but we have a lot of fun over it. I don't know. One day we're just gonna have to get him on and just show him what the voice sounds like. I think
it'll be like a flash mob. We'll just break out an Alistair Overeem. I'll need to go on a great diet and lubricate my throat with some great drinks and things like that to really get it on point. I'm not gonna do it now, but yeah, Alistair Overeem, official, unofficial, he'll be handing out flyers outside the arena. But if we do see him, we will hopefully be able to interview him. So lots of stuff coming from UFC Adelaide. Like I said, if there's anything specific that you want to see, anything you want us to ask or find out, just hit us up on Twitter, guys, at Submission AUS. We're going to have tons of tweets, live tweeting. If we see Mark Hunt, ruffling a packet of chips and opening them, you best believe we're going to be tweeting about what the flavor is and what we see. So keep in contact at Submission AUS. Without further ado, I mean, our first guest is not someone that we want to keep waiting. And I believe, Dennis, you are doing the introduction.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a UFC Knockout of the Night and Fight of the Night winner. He's one of the top middleweights in the world and joins us straight out of Texas. We have none other than Tim Kennedy back on Submission Radio in 2015. Tim, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. What's going on? I like the introduction. It makes me sound like really good.
Yeah, we pride ourselves on our fantastic introductions. Now, last time we spoke was around November of last year. You said you were essentially taking a break from MMA. We can only imagine you've been doing some things to sort of enjoy your life, keep yourself happy, and do some things like hunting. What has Tim Kennedy been up to in the last 5 or so months?
Oh, man. Did a movie, a TV show, and a ton of hunting. Hunting season was like all fall and winter long, so hunted a whole bunch and got a bunch of meat in my freezer. So life has been really cool. I made a son, so I have a little version of me with maybe a little less hair on his legs, but essentially very similar.
It's interesting. I want to ask you about a couple of things that you mentioned. The first one with the son, when you said obviously that you had a son, a lot of people on Twitter thought it was an April Fool's joke. A lot of them said, "Oh, Tim Kennedy's just trying to fool us." So the son's for real for everybody out there who thought it was just an April Fool's prank.
Yeah, I actually have like friends in California that still think I'm pulling an April Fool's joke. Like friends that I grew up with, for like 5, 6 years running. I've done something similar to that every April Fool's. Like, hey, Ginger's pregnant, or I just want to welcome my new son in the world, or something along those lines. And but this one was for real. It was I know it was a boy who cried wolf, which is what made it funny for April's first.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally for real.
So Tim Kennedy, the boy who cried son. Well, congratulations. I mean, that's a huge deal. We also hear that you'll be going to South America to film a TV show where you catch war criminals. I mean, that seems really right up your alley, but also pretty crazy, at least to guys like us. I mean, these are war criminals. Tell us about the show.
I really can't say anything outside of that. I'm supposed to leave today, but a big volcano in Chile erupted yesterday, or day before yesterday, and I guess the ash cloud is making maybe my departure being postponed for a minute. I'm not sure, but I'm supposed to fly out tonight and start work on Monday. Get my kit set up and start doing all the things you got to do to track people down.
Well, it's going to be an amazing show. We can't wait till it all comes together. Now, Tim, last time we had you on the program, you mentioned you were still pretty pissed off about what happened with the Stoolgate incident, with your fight with Yoel Romero. Just wondering, a few months down the track, I believe it's about 5 or 6, how are you feeling now about the whole situation? And are you getting the itch at all to get back into the octagon?
I think I'll always have the itch. I remember Chuck Liddell, in the twilight of his career, he still always mentally was like wanting to fight, and he had the offensive tools to be able to beat anybody. But then his body and his brain can only do so much. Forrest Griffin, another example of that. The list goes on. I'm not going to be that guy that's going to be 1, 2, 3 fights too late. I'm gonna be done when I'm done, and but I'm always gonna have that itch. Even after the last fight, even how stupid that whole fight was. Even afterwards, I watch my friends fight, or I'm cornering a guy, or you still have that itch. I'm still training. Hell, I'm training 15 times a week still. So things are good.
Wow, 15 times a week. Yeah, that's something I wanted to check. During this downtime, have you been training at all and stopping by Jackson Winklejohns to help out your teammates train for fights?
I've been training nonstop. I got a bunch of training partners here in Austin. I got a bunch of training partners, obviously, in New Mexico. And every chance I get, I'm trying to give back to guys that help me get ready for fights, whether I'm cornering them or training with them, just another body, another partner, and then still trying to get better as an athlete myself. The only good part is I train in the morning, and then I have the whole day to do whatever I wanted, which usually involves, guns or helicopters or some other way of trying to kill myself, and then train again that night. I got to do that for the past, 7 months.
Yeah, you definitely live a very interesting life, Tim. Speaking of fights, a big fight transpired over the weekend. It was between one of your former opponents, Luke Rockhold, and Lyoto Machida, a big fight for the middleweight division. Just wondering, did you get a chance to watch that fight? And if you did, what were your thoughts from it?
I did watch it. I was unsurprised. I think that that fight could happen 10 different times, and the exact same outcome would happen all 10 times. When you have the middleweight division and pretty much number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are Strikeforce guys, I think it's kind of clear, what we were like when we were just at Strikeforce. Everybody's making fun of us, a bunch of little fish in a little pond. Now here we are as the 2 through 6 contenders, Luke effortlessly dismantled Lyoto. Everything that everybody said, like his hits, his footwork, is so tricky, so offensive, so unpredictable, blah, 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 blah. Luke walked him down and beat the crap out of him effortlessly,
Yeah, certainly. And, it's interesting that you mentioned the whole thing about the Strikeforce fighters being in a pond. Does it make you feel sort of more motivated to come back? Because I mean, you and Luke, you guys had a very close fight. You and Jacare, you guys fought previously before. Does it get you any more motivated to get back in there and possibly get rematches against these guys who you fought previously and had some really good fights against before?
Yes and no. When we all came to the UFC, like with the exception of Vitor Belfort and Luke, none of us have lost to a single UFC fighter. From Yoel Romero, Luke, Jacare, and myself, we steamrolled every single one of our opponents in the entire UFC. I think we're like 14-1 with Luke having that loss, which was steroids and TRT. So we'll put an asterisk by that. We're like nearly 15-0. So the vindication is like everybody that have been was so relentless and unforgiving, writing about us, like these guys suck, they can't hang in the deep waters of the UFC. And now we're just like, there's nobody here for us. We've already eaten up everybody and chewed them out and spit them out. So I guess that just means that the four of us are going to be fighting each other, for the next 2 years. I was like, me and Yoel again, super competitive, super close. I thought I'd beat Jacare. They gave the decision to him. Again, a very super close fight. Jacare and Luke, another very, very close fight. Luke and I, another close fight. Like how many times are we going to be fighting each other with super close outcomes? So I don't know, man. I have mad respect for those guys, Luke and Jacare. They're both very talented athletes. And, I think Luke is going to win a title this year. He's a real bad matchup for Chris Weidman. And, I don't know if that Jacare is on the back burner. It's tough. Had he fought Yoel, Jacare would have got probably the title fight. But, in the situation that they're in, I think we're going to see another belt with Luke Rockhold.
Yeah, a lot of people are picking that, and yeah, it's absolutely devastating that the Yoel Romero-Jacare fight didn't happen. It was something we were really looking forward to. While we're on the subject, you mentioned Rockhold versus Weidman. How do you see that fight going? You say Luke's got the advantage. How do you see the fight playing out stylistically?
It's a bad fight for Chris, stylistically. He's going to take Luke down. Luke is really hard to take down, and when you get him down, his jiu-jitsu is amazing. It's one of the best and underrated offensive games, jiu-jitsu games in MMA. And but then he has the range, he has the height, he has the size, he has the power. It's a very, very difficult of all of the fights. If you look at Chris and match him up with the next six of us, that's his toughest matchup. And I think Chris and I would be a very tough fight. I think Jacare and Chris would be a tough fight. Yoel and Chris would be a very tough fight. And then we have Luke sitting here. So it's I don't see. I think Luke could win a decision, a 5-round outpoint him, hit him on the outside, force Chris to have to push for the takedown, push for the big punches while he's getting eaten up on angles. I could also see. I think Chris wanes in the later rounds. He loses some steam. That doesn't happen with Luke. Luke, if anything, gets faster and better as the rounds go on. I think Jacare, Luke Rockhold 1 is a clear example of that, where he just starts, when his momentum starts building, he doesn't get tired. He just picks up the volume. And that'd be a bad situation for a guy who, cuts so much, has so much strength, but then starts waning towards the end of the fight.
Yeah, for sure. Now, let's talk about yourself. You mentioned this week that you'd possibly be interested in a matchup with Lyoto Machida next, and you also added that you'd like a stipulation to the fight. The loser of the fight has to leave the UFC Fighting Championship. Just wondering, what did you suggest that stipulation, Tim?
I wouldn't stipulation. I have never said stipulation, and I was making fun with the aerial. We're both old. I think I just said, man, we're both crotchety-old farts. We've both been fighting for so long that, at this point of our career, I think if both of us had another loss, is there any realistic chance I would be fighting for a title? And if I'm not going to be fighting, if I don't have hopes of fighting for a title, then what's the point of me fighting? I'm not going to be that guy that is just holding on for another fight for another paycheck. That's not, I want to be fighting the best guys in the world. And, Lyoto's still one of those guys. I think he's one of the most talented athletes ever, but he's also getting old, maybe losing a little bit of his edge and the quickness that he relied upon. His style is very based on responsiveness, and that's one of the first things to go. My style, on the other hand, that power grinder with big punches, with takedowns, lay on top of you and just take your soul and eat it. Obviously not a fan favorite, but with, Lyoto and I, my style lasts longer. Randy Couture, great example of how long you can carry that style. Dan Henderson, even though he's post-prime now, shouldn't be fighting anymore. He took that into his 40s as well. And Lyoto, he's like, I got to catch you coming in. You got to make a mistake, and I got to capitalize on it. Those are all very quick, responsive type things that go with age. So I was just making fun of him, talking crap.
So in regards to fighting Machida, though, are you actually interested? Would you come back for a fight with Lyoto Machida?
Yeah, maybe. If the circumstances are right, the venue is right. I say I always have the itch to fight, and that's never going to change. And but now at this point, I have so much awesome things going on that really things have to be great. And a guy like Lyoto, mad respect, super talented, love him to death, been a fan of him forever. He and I think could put on an awesome fight. Put us in the right venue on the right night, and maybe that'd be something fun.
Well, maybe's enough for us to get excited about it, Tim. Just a fun question here for the fans. If the matchup does sort of come together, what would you see as your advantages over Machida, and how would you see the fight playing out?
Yeah, I have so many advantages over him that I'm not sure I can even list them. First and foremost, I don't ingest urine. I think my ability to consume other fluids is first and foremost paramount in the matchup. So the toxins that are going to be leaving my penis, I'm not going to put back down my throat. So that's major. And second is I think karate's dead. So, he may be good at a whole bunch of things. And karate is also one of them, but karate is not what's made him successful. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He has fantastic wrestling. He has great kickboxing. But he can still walk out with his karate gi. He can try to front kick me. That'd be cool. What else? I'm trying to think of other things that I had better hair.
Hey, he had the sponsorship from Head and Shoulders there, Tim. That's a big call.
Dude, first of all, well, if you have dandruff, which I don't, so that falls into the advantage category as well. I don't have flaky pieces of my scalp falling onto my shoulders, or I need a sponsorship from a shampoo company that specializes in dandruff.
That's true, and that's a huge factor in every fight, as every pro fighter will know. We're not fighters, but we'll definitely take your word for that. So that's 5 interesting points. Either way, Tim, with this Machida fight and the way he's speaking about loser leaves town, it definitely seems like retirement has crossed your mind. Have you had a chance to think about it? And assuming you return, how many fights or how many years do you think you'll continue to fight for?
Like I said, I could. Physically, I could fight for forever. I could fight for 4, 5, 6 years. That's another 10, 12 fights. If that's my brain and my body. It's whether I want to or not. If it makes sense for my family, if it makes sense for my business and my work. I have some great relationships with a lot of different people that I've been working. I've been a professional athlete for 13 years now as a professional fighter. So who knows, I'm never going to be like, okay, I'm retired. I think it's just going to be like, man, I don't know. I just don't feel like fighting, or man, I'm really excited about this fight. Somewhere in between there is where I am right now.
Now, certainly a great point there, Tim. And obviously you mentioned Machida's an interesting matchup for you. Is there any, obviously the division is such a huge, vast division now in the UFC. Are there any other names in the division that if Lyoto Machida can't, make the fight or something like that you'd be interested in possibly matching up with as well? Because there's some great people in the division that you could possibly match up with.
Thank you.
Well, there's a guy called Jacare who might be looking for a fight that fans would love to see a rematch. Obviously mentioned that you guys had a close fight. There's a guy called Michael Bisping that you've been wanting to fight, and that might be a great fight as well. Who knows? There might even
beat
be
him up real bad.
What? Sorry?
I beat him up real bad. I beat him for 25 minutes.
Yeah, but he seemed pretty keen on a rematch afterwards.
That's crazy talk. Yeah, I'd totally fight him again, but I mean that's just an easy paycheck.
Well, nothing wrong with an easy paycheck for me and Casper here in Australia. But I was wondering, Tim, speaking of sort of older fighters, this fight between Chris Weidman and Vitor Belfort. Now, this thing's been delayed way too many times. Fans have been looking forward to it, but I feel like a lot of the excitement for this fight has died down quite a bit. Now, Belfort has actually, denied fighting again. He's 38 years old and he wants to hold out for this title match. Obviously, he's off the TRT and we haven't seen him fight since. A lot of fans are still asking and wondering this. Do you think when he jumps in the octagon against Chris Weidman, we'll see the same Vitor Belfort as we've seen previously, obviously, when he was back on the TRT?
Yeah, man, my excitement for this level is, or my excitement for this fight is dropping like Vitor Belfort's testosterone levels. It's just like plummeting every single day. And I think, and having nothing to do with Chris Weidman. It's just failed drug test here, hidden drug test there, a fake injury here. It's just like, come on, man. You've been cheating the system for too long. You kind of got caught, even though you've been caught a couple of times in the past. It's like, I don't even think he deserves to be fighting for the title. I know he's a huge name in Brazil and people love him and he has a great haircut, and like Jesus Christ is like the best and greatest thing in the world, and he drinks unicorn blood. But like the hypocrisy that exists within that one man is too numerous to list in this short interview.
Well, we're actually going to wrap up the interview in a second, Tim. Before that, we're going to ask one fan question, and then we're going to run through the Submission Radio tap-out round. The one fan question that we have here, it's from a guy called Alt-Space-Delete. His question is, being someone who stands up against PED users in the sport, I'd love to hear Tim's reaction and thoughts on Anderson Silva being busted for steroids.
I'm surprised. I mean, how many Brazilian athletes are there that haven't tested positive? Jose Aldo, he hasn't, right? Jacare hasn't. But it seems like every single time one of them is randomly tested, they fail. Maybe there's a pattern here. It was disappointing. I think Fedor and Anderson are and Sakuraba, like the three greatest ever. And seeing a guy like that's been the best ever go out like that, it's disappointing, it's heartbreaking, it's pathetic, but unsurprising.
Yeah, it was definitely a difficult situation for a lot of the MMA community when they found out. Now, Tim, we're going to wrap up the interview with a thing we call the Submission Radio Tap-Out Round. We throw some fun questions at you, and you answer with the first thing that comes to mind, a lot like word association. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, now you jumped out of a helicopter this month. For the listeners at home who might have Mission Impossible moments in their lives, what's one tip you can give us when jumping out of a helicopter?
Make sure that your leg strap is not over your testicles.
I don't quite understand the dynamics. I've never jumped out of a helicopter, but that is pretty simple to follow, so I understand where you're coming from. What is your favorite place to wear your Cubs Swanson socks to?
Man, so I was alone in a hotel in Oklahoma teaching a seminar. I was away from my friends. I was away from, my family. Mm-hmm. And, I was really sad. And I opened my bag, and there is a brand new pair of Cub Swanson socks that gets snuck into my bag.
Boom.
So I just want to relive that moment over and over again. It's not like I want to, they're amazing socks, and I want to wear them everywhere. But I just want to open up my suitcase when I'm kind of down in the dumps, and just need a little pick-me-up and be like, oh, my God. Cub Swanson socks. How fantastic.
Well, there you go. Are you sure Cub didn't take your wallet out as well while he was putting the socks in?
No, but I think no, I won't tell you what he did. Never mind.
Okay, so here's an interesting question. Obviously, you're someone that knows combat quite well. What are your thoughts on Krav Maga for combat and street fighting? Do you think it's an effective style?
Yes, it is a great effective style for self-defense. It has zero application in MMA, so they're trying to turn it into kind of a sporty thing too, which is not. Mm-hmm. It is a self-defense combative art form, which is super cool, as long as people understand the limitations of their own physicality. One of the major problems is these guys go to this, or these ladies go to these courses, and they're like, man, I know Krav Maga. I could, like, kick a guy in the groin and poke him in the eyes. I'm like the dangerous dude on the street. You're like, bro, you're 135 pounds with your clothes being soaked, like totally soaking wet. You're bald. You have tiny little strings for arms. You're really just now a liability to yourself. So you just need to have an accurate understanding of who and what you are. It's a great art. It's super great for combatives and self-defense. You just need to really have a realistic understanding and know yourself.
Yep, definitely all good points. Tim, one of the last questions, you tweeted a picture of what you always had, or what you have on you almost all the time, and included a knife, a gun, amongst other things. Have you ever forgotten to remove them during weigh-ins or warm-ups before a fight?
No, but I have gone to the airport and, like, walking to the security line, freak out and be like, oh, crap. And then, like, have to run over to the counter and be like, I need my bag back. I need to stash a couple of these things. So that has happened.
All right, Tim, last question. You tweeted out on Friday the 13th. So this is Friday the 13th. It has been pretty disappointing, but the night is coming in with hopefully a masked psychopath tapping on my window. Just want to find out, Tim, did any psychopaths end up dropping by the house and spending some time with you? There was absolutely nothing that happened. The levels of disappointment that day were just layered and layered on top of each other.
That's the worst.
I would have been fine with, like, Freddy Cougar claws just being dragged across my door, or a dude in a hockey mask, with a machete, somebody with a chainsaw, like, with blood dripping off of it. No, but nothing. It was a horrible day.
Yeah, Eminem stayed home that day. Well, the good thing is you'll be able to take out your frustration on those psychos when you go out and catch these war criminals. Can't wait to see the TV show. And, as fans, we really hope that you do return to MMA so we can watch you in the cage. Guys, make sure to follow Tim and all his hilarious tweets at Tim Kennedy MMA. That's Twitter, of course. And Tim, as always, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You guys are the best. Thank you.
This is Diego Sanchez, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is competing at Bellator 137, Halsey vs. Grove, on May 25th. He has a perfect 8-0 record and is, of course, the Bellator middleweight champion. He is none other than Brandon Bull Halsey. Brandon, welcome to Submission Radio. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours, Brendan. Now, let's talk about you. You've had 8 fights, you've won all 8 of them, and you made your pro debut just over 3 years ago, and now you're the Bellator middleweight champion. That's incredibly impressive. Before we talk about your upcoming fight, we want to talk about your entry into MMA. How did you first get into the sport?
I come from a wrestling background. I wrestled in college. I noticed that, wrestlers had, a dominant position in MMA, and they were, at the top of the food chain. So I decided, is either get an office job or pursue something that I was passionate about. And, working it out and being an athlete was, always a dream of mine. And being able to make a career out of it was just, the most logical choice for me.
Yeah, certainly right, Brendan. And as Casper mentioned, you're only 3 years into your pro career. How difficult was it for you to make that transition from wrestling to MMA? Was it an easy one for you? Because we've spoken to a lot of wrestlers before, and some of them have a bit of a difficult transition getting used to the striking and the other aspects of the game.
Yeah. Nobody likes getting punched in the face. Wrestlers have kind of a difficulty. They go from wrestling then to getting punched, and they get in uncomfortable positions, and then they kind of, lose fights that way. They kind of get out of their element, and they get hit once, and they kind of lose focus. So being able to kind of keep your composure and kind of take the punches and roll with the punches, basically, is the name of the game. And being able to be comfortable and sit in the pocket and throw strikes is, one of the biggest things for a wrestler to do.
For sure. And a lot of people, a lot of athletes now, guys that may have gone on to other sports now are considering mixed martial arts because the sport is becoming so mainstream. Was MMA something that you watched and you were a fan of since you were young, or is it just something that you sort of fell into after wrestling?
Oh, yeah. I can remember when I was, 6 years old, watching the very first UFC with Royce Gracie winning the tournament. And it was kind of, a spectacle because, you have all these different backgrounds, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, karate, and you know, all these guys. So it's kind of, you know, it's kind of exciting to watch. You know, which style is going to be the best, and you know, kind of narrowed down to, you know, wrestling was one of the more dominant, and same with jiu-jitsu. And then, you know, I think everybody kind of looked at that and been like, okay, yeah, we could kind of dominate the sport with wrestling if we kind of become well-rounded at everything else.
Mm.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, as Casper mentioned, it was just such a big event for all the MMA fans. Now, you fought Shawnee Carter in only your second pro fight, for fans that didn't know. What was that like for you? And were you daunted going up against a guy with so many fights compared to you only fighting for the second time?
You know, what's funny is my manager called me and told me, you know, there's I think a week's notice for the fight. You know, hey, you could fight Shawnee Carter next week in King of the Cage. I was like, oh, awesome, yeah, let's do it.
Mhm.
I didn't even know who Shawnee Carter was. I didn't even follow him. I just thought, you know, yeah, I got to fight. That's cool.
Wow,
And,
that's
you know, then told me he was a UFC veteran, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's a bonus.
yeah.
What did you think when you saw his attire, his pimp attire? Did that intimidate you at all?
Yeah, it was kind of, they kind of told me a little bit about him. You know, he's a little flashy, wear a skirt to fight, and I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to fight a guy in a skirt. That's the last thing I need to do.
Well, like we mentioned, you're only 8 fights into your pro MMA career. When you won the middleweight championship Bellator 126, you did it against Alexander Shlemenko, who not only is one of Bellator's most feared fighters, but he's had well over 50 fights. How did it feel beating the man in only 35 seconds?
You know, it felt good. It was, you know, a great experience. You know, I trained with him in the past. He used to do some of his camps out of HP Ultimate where I trained.
Mm.
And, you know, we kind of had a feel for his style and kind of how the match was, you know, going to play out. So it wasn't too big of a surprise, you know, the way it went down. But, you know, I mean, I think we thought it was pretty much going to go that way because, you know, we want to exploit his kind of weaknesses, and we knew he was not that good on the ground. And he wasn't able to kind of deal with the wrestling background.
No, that's a really interesting analysis there, because I suppose up to that point, a lot of people saw him as sort of one of the best guys in the division, as Casper mentioned. So you beat Alex and you become the Bellator middleweight champion. How did your life change after that happened? Because obviously you were well known in the MMA community, but after you beat Alexander in such a dominant fashion, how did it all change for you, Brendan?
You know, I feel like I'm just starting to blossom in my career. I'm just kind of finding my groove, and, you know, everything's falling into place. I feel like 2015 is going to be a big year for me. Looking to do some exciting things, have some, you know, exciting highlight fights, and, you know, just improve in my MMA career. Just improve my striking and all around become a better fighter.
Sure.
I want to fight the best competition, and I want to be the best pound for pound fighter in the world.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so far you're on your way there. You know, Shlemenko, he knocked out Melvin Manhoef and Cordiard afterwards. The fight was a while back now, but then he tested positive for elevated testosterone levels before failing the drug test. How would you have felt about a Shlemenko rematch? And was it something that you were interested in?
Yeah, you know, obviously he had some stuff he needed to get off his chest, and he wants to rematch. You know, I would love to. If he feels like he slipped and had an accident and, you know, it was a fluke, I, you know, welcome him to a rematch. Unfortunately, he tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, so I don't think we'll see that anytime this year, but, you know, I would have welcomed a rematch.
Yeah, obviously you mentioned you've trained with him and you fought him before. Were you surprised when you found out about these test results with Shlemenko?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going through his head between our fight and the Manhoef fight, but I don't know if he felt like he needed to change something up in this game, and, you know, he needed to do performance-enhancing drugs to become bigger and stronger. But, you know, obviously it was the wrong choice, and, you know, he's obviously paying for it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the next question, I don't want you to think that it's anything related to our previous question, but one of the things that people notice when they see you is your hulking physique. And I got to ask, you know, do you do a lot of heavy lifting in training, or are you just one of those lucky guys that's just genetically big, even if you're even if you're just doing heaps of cardio?
It's both. You know, I was blessed. God gave me the genetics, and, you know, I work hard. I, you know, obviously lift weights. These muscles just didn't grow overnight, and, you know, I put in the hard work, and it's no surprise that, you know, people look at me and they, you know, they question all the, you know, oh, what's he doing? You know, a lot of these guys give MMA a bad name by, you know, using performance-enhancing drugs. And, you know, I just was blessed with the genetics, and, you know, yeah, I put in the hard work. And so it kind of gives us guys that do it the old-fashioned way a bad rap.
Mm.
Yeah, certainly. Now let's talk about your fight. Your opponent, Kendall Grove, is a UFC veteran, and he's had a lot of experience on his side. What do you think are his biggest threats, and what are your advantages in this fight?
You know, obviously, I'm never looking past anybody. He's a UFC veteran. He's had fights, but, you know, so as a lot of the guys that I fought, you know, Brett Cooper, Alexander Shlemenko, I'm just going to do what I normally do, is go out there and, you know, basically run through them. You know, I'm going to use my physical abilities, my strength, my speed. I feel like I'm better technical than he is, too, and quicker. And I feel like I'm going to beat him every single position that we come up against.
You've never dealt with an opponent who's had a reach like Kendall. Have you done anything specific in camp or brought in any new training partners to help deal with Kendall's reach?
Yeah, you know, I haven't fought a guy that's, you know, 6'6" on stilts, so it's definitely going to be a new adventure. But, you know, I'm ready to for all, you know, he's going to throw at me. I brought guys in to, you know, simulate his reach and his size, and we'll be ready for it.
Yeah, well, we actually saw you spoke to Frank Trigg about a year ago and mentioned that your coaches tailor your training and game plan to complement and make use of your wrestling. You were 6-0 at that time. How do you feel about the development of your game now? And would you be possibly looking to showcase your improved striking against Kendall this time around?
Yeah, every single fight I build on, you know, trying to improve. I've had an 8-month layoff, so I've had plenty of time to work on my stand-up and my striking, and I think people are going to be surprised when I bring a new package to the table.
Sure. In that same interview, Brandon, you mentioned how you're sparring 5 days a week and just standing and banging with your partners. You know, we understand that as a wrestler, you would want to work on improving your striking so that it catches up to the level of your wrestling. But considering where the sport is heading in regards to fighting smart, not hard, and having guys like Chris Lieben and Martin Kampmann saying they regret so many shots, you know, taking so many shots in training, you know, do you think it's wise to spar so often and risk taking big shots?
Oh no, it's always, you got to listen to your body. You got to, you know, listen to your injuries and not try to be a tough guy and try to push through them. Like you said, you know, it's all about working smarter, not harder. And you know, I try to listen to my body as much as possible. Yeah, you know, I want to improve my stand-up. Is sparring always the best option? No, you know, technique is always gonna, you know, prevail over, you know, just going out and just punching each other all the time. So, you know, we've been drilling. Yeah, we've been sparring too, but, you know, we always listen to our body and being smart about it.
Sure. You know, you're a young guy. You're a big, strong guy. Have you ever had any scary experiences in sparring, like any serious knockdowns or knockouts or anything like that?
No. It's nothing yet. So, you know, hopefully, you know, I continue through my career with no accidents and training and keep healthy.
Sure.
Yeah, well, we actually had Jeremy Horn on the show I think it was a few weeks back, and he mentioned that in his whole career, and he had, I believe, over 100 fights, he didn't have one major injury. So there you go. It is possible. Now, you've mentioned that you want to fight a whole bunch of times in 2015. Obviously, Bellator doesn't put on as many frequent fight cards as the UFC does. Tell us, how many fights do you want to fight this year? And talk to the people who haven't watched Bellator, because there's a lot of listeners here in Australia. Tell us a little bit about the middleweight division. Who are some names in the division that you're excited to matching up with if you do beat Kendall Grove?
You know, the Bellator hasn't really brought too many people into the middleweight division. You know, I'd like to see more depth at it. I mean, they're bringing more people in that light heavyweight. They just signed Phil Davis. You know, obviously you got Tito Ortiz, Stephan Bonner, Timo, Liam McGear's the new champ, Maino Newton, the former champ. So, you know, I want Bellator to kind of bring in some people like that in the roster at middleweight. You know, I'm always looking to challenge myself and fight the best in the world. You know, obviously they don't have that many cards. They kind of cut back this year. The fight cards are going more of a format of once a month. And, you know, I'd like to fight, you know, as much as possible that my body will allow me to. I don't want to fight so often that I'm, you know, in there all the time and my body's trying to recover. But, you know, 3 to 4 times is, you know, kind of that number that I like to shoot for fights in a year.
Yeah, certainly right. Phil Davis, obviously a big name added to the Bellator roster. Obviously, like you mentioned, not that many people are middleweight. Do you see yourself possibly doing a catchweight fight with Phil if you do run out of opponents? Because that would be a big fight for all the Bellator fans out there as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always looking to challenge myself. Like I said, I want to be the best pound for pound fighter, and fighting the best in the world is, fighting a top 10 guy like that will, definitely shoot me into, the higher level opponents. And I welcome that fight, and, I'm just looking to stuff in the future.
Sure. Now, on the other side of the coin, Dana White was fairly recently asked about possibly buying out Bellator, and he said that there wasn't a single guy or contract he would be interested in. Being that you're the champion, young and undefeated, we automatically thought of you. Do you see yourself ever going to the UFC and ever testing yourself in their middleweight division?
Yeah, obviously I got to be smart about my career, and, whatever opportunities present itself in the future, I'm going to do what's best for me. And, that's obviously crossed my mind, and that would be an option.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to play a fun little game with you, Brandon, to finish off the interview. It's called the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. Hey, you've heard about this before, have you?
I haven't heard about it, but I'm always up for new things.
Okay, wonderful. Well, GQ says it's the sexiest MMA segment in radio as sourced by us. Basically, we throw some fun questions at you, and we want you to answer sort of with the first thing that comes to mind, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, here we go. The weirdest place you've worn the Bellator belt thus far?
The bathroom.
Ooh. Yeah, you like us. We would do that kind of stuff. We'd wake up in the morning, and first thing we'd do is put the belt on. Nothing else, just the belt. Now, what were the first words out of your parents' mouth when you told them that you wanted to be a professional fighter?
You better not lose.
Name one middleweight outside Bellator who you'd love to match up with.
Chris Weidman.
What would Brendan be doing now if he wasn't a fighter?
Probably stuck in a corporate office.
Now tell us, as a married man, Brendan, give us one tip. What's a good tip to a successful marriage for all the listeners out there?
Being a good listener, listening to your wife.
Yeah. It's like, I like Homer Simpson's method where he buys those glasses that have the eyes on them and they're open, and then he can just go to sleep.
Yeah. Whatever she says is right.
Yeah, just nod, just grit your teeth and yep, sure. Ever try to get out of doing work around the house, Brandon, by saying, hey, I'm the Bellator middleweight champion, you do it?
Yeah. That doesn't work in the house. May work outside, but not in the house. I'm still the husband.
Brandon, can you share any funny or crazy stories from your time wrestling at Cal State?
Oh, man. There's a bag full of those.
We'll just take the craziest one. We don't mind.
I'd say the craziest one is when we've wrestled in northern Colorado. It's up in the Rockies where it gets really cold, and we're actually traveling from the meet, and we actually got caught in the snowstorm and spun out on the side of the road, and actually got stuck in a snowstorm, and the van, I think we got about 4 feet of snow that covered up against the van before I think the AAA car came about 5 hours later. So we were stuck out there in the snow, not knowing if we were going to get out alive or not. So that was kind of a scary moment in our life.
Wow.
Describe Scott Coker in one word.
Interesting.
Give us your thoughts on Rampage leaving Bellator for UFC, even though he was still in contract with Bellator.
How do I feel about that?
Yeah, sort of describe it in a couple of words.
A man's got to do what a man's got to do. I mean, it feels like that's what's best for him, then, that's off to him.
Yeah, true. Finally, Brendan, the most important prediction. How are you beating Kendall Grover Bellator 137? What is the official prediction?
It's going to get stopped early. That's all I can say.
All right, there you go. Another early night for Brendan Halsey. Don't forget, guys, to watch the fight. Brendan fights Kendall Grover Bellator 137 on the 15th of May. Due to the time difference, it's, of course, going to be the 16th of May here in Australia. And, of course, follow Brendan on Twitter at Brendan Bull Halsey. Brendan, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Thanks for doing the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. It was a pleasure.
This is Don Fry, and you're listening to Submission Radio. You touch that dial, and I'll kill you.
All right, guys, our next guest needs very little introduction. He beat Anthony Pettis at UFC 185 very recently, and he is now the UFC Lightweight champion. He is a UFC veteran, Rafael Dos Anjos. Welcome to Submission Radio. How are you?
Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Everything's great. I'm doing good.
Good. Well, you know, you are the champ, so the pleasure is really all ours. It's an honor to have you on. You won the UFC Lightweight title about a month and a half ago. We can only imagine how your life has changed. How has the last month and a half been for you since becoming the UFC champion?
Man, a lot of things changed, you know, and I've been really busy, you know, traveling and enjoying my family as much as I can, and try to heal my knee up. My knee still bother me, and I just had my nose surgery last week because I had a hard time to breathe. Before that, now I can breathe better, and I'm just like to focus on enjoy my family and heal my body, you know, because I fought a lot last year. I just want to make sure my body's gonna be 100% for the next challenger.
Yeah, certainly, and obviously very important. Now, Rafael, we just want to talk a little bit about your fight with Anthony first. You know, when the fight between you and Anthony Pettis was originally announced, people didn't give you much of a shot against Anthony. Was that one of your motivators going into the fight against Pettis?
Yeah, for sure, man. I'm usually to be an underdog, you know. That's extra booster for me, actually. It is extra motivation. And when I got a call for this fight, man, I knew I was going to win. I've been on this game for a long time. And Pat is a great opponent. He's a great fighter. But I think he never faced nobody like me. And I had more experience on the cage. I had more like a lifetime experience too. And I passed through like a lot of bad moments of my whole life, and for sure I knew it's gonna be my time. But for the fact that I be underdog, I was okay with that. Actually, it helped me. You know, I always wanna go over it, and it's a extra motivation.
Yeah, I feel, Rafael, like you were the underdog in a lot of your recent fights against Benson Henderson, Cowboy Cerrone, and then against Anthony Pettis. You know, it's taken you 10 years of fighting, 17 fights in the UFC to finally get a title shot. You know, what did it feel like when you were finally in the octagon at UFC 185, standing across from Anthony Pettis? You know, it must have been a surreal experience standing on that big stage fighting for the title.
Yeah, man, especially because when I fought in Dallas like 6 years ago, and I was doing the first fight of the night when I got my first UFC win against Robert Emerson. And so then I was thinking, man, six years later, here I am, fight for the title on the main event, you know, and that was a great experience. But man, every time that I have big challenge, I fight better, you know, and I think I knew that against Pettis would not be different, and I knew I had a big challenge coming up. But man, I always like big challenge, you know. I know I'm gonna do good.
Yeah, now Anthony said that one of the punches in the first round hurt his eye. Just wondering, did you have any idea that he was hurt from the start of the fight? And did you feel at any points during the fight that you actually had an opportunity to finish him?
Yeah, like I was saying on my interviews before the fight. So Anthony Pettis, he was saying that he's gonna knock me out. He can beat me on my own game. Blah 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 blah. And then the people asking about it, I say everybody has a plan before get punched, and it was what happened, you know. And so I felt that I caught him with the left hand. But I was able to keep my pressure, you know. I was keeping showing heavy hands, kicks, and then I mixed it with my takedown. But Anthony, man, he's a dangerous opponent, you know. He handled it, you know. He handled it all the way to the fifth round. He was like still dangerous, but man, I thank God I was able to keep my pressure and keep my strategy. Oh,
yeah, he kept the pressure on the whole fight, and it really was a spectacular performance. You know, Before your big streak, Rafael, and of course your big title win, you had some tough losses to guys that weren't necessarily at the top of the division, like Gleison Tibau and Clade Guida and Tyson Griffin. Around those times, did it ever seem like you may not become champion? Was it hard for you to continue?
Man, everything, I do in my life, I try to be the best. And so after the fight against Tibau, I was living in Brazil, and I wasn't training like I always training hard, I always do my best, but I didn't have good training partners. I didn't have a base to train. I had good coaches, which is still my coach, Roberto Gordo. He's my jiu-jitsu coach. I was training with him, but I didn't have a good stand-up coach. I didn't have good wrestling coach, and good sparring partners too. And so after the fight against Tibau, I talked to my wife, with me and my family decided to move to California. So when I start training with Master Rafael Cordeiro, and then now we here at Kings MMA, we have a better partners, and also I have my team involved, in Singapore. We can always go there training, best Muay Thai guys in the world. And so I still doing that connection. Every twice a year, 3 times a year, I go to Singapore, I spend some time there. So it's been helping me a lot to be better every day. And that's my intention, be better every fight. And then since I moved here, so I start go often to Singapore too, start training harder, and I climb the division.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Cordero. Obviously, he's the head of Kings MMA. I reckon he very may possibly be the coach of the year. I mean, he's just done amazing things with a lot of fighters. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with him.
Yeah, Master Rafael Cordeiro is an amazing guy. He understands the fighters. And then the mix. I got a perfect team, and now the mix between Master Rafael Cordeiro and Master Roberto Gordo made a lot of difference for me, because Gordo knows everything about jiu-jitsu, and Master Cordeiro knows everything about MMA, Muay Thai, and but it's been great training with him. He has perfect eyes for fighter. He knows by look at you, he know what is your mistakes. And so here with him, I have what I don't have in Brazil. I have someone over me, looking over me, try to correct my mistakes. And we are together 3 times a week. He's always over me, look at me, and fixing my mistakes. I think that's why I've been improving a lot.
Sure. Now, moving on to your next fight, Rafael, you'll likely be fighting the winner of Khabib Nurmagomedov and Donald Cerrone. Who do you think wins the fight, and why?
Man, I think it is a 50% fight, I'm going to tell the truth. Cerrone, I fought them both, so I lost for Khabib, but I beat Cerrone. But, man, Cerrone is a tough fight. I don't know how Khabib is gonna deal with Dodo. He's just coming back from a bad knee injury. He's out for a couple almost a year, couple of months, and maybe this can make a difference. But Cerrone, he's being active, and for sure it's gonna make a lot of difference for him. But I think it's a 50% fight. It can go either way.
Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting contest. Now, given that you previously lost to Khabib, would you say that that's the fight that you'd be more interested in, so you could avenge that loss next?
For sure, man. I don't wanna make any excuses, but I had a couple issues before Khabib's fight, but no excuses. He did a great job. He did a perfect strategy. He was able to help me down, and keep that pressure. I wasn't able to defend his takedown, but man, for sure, I'm a different fighter now. And I was fighting with a lot of pressure, because I was thinking about my title shot, all those things. and I was under pressure. But man, for sure, the next fight will be different if he beats Cerrone. And I think, man, it's gonna be a different fighter. I'm a complete fight now. I got extra confidence, and I'm really think I got on the point. Now I'm a champion, and man, my spiritual life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're on fire right now, Rafael. You mentioned that you had some issues before the Khabib fight. I'm just curious, what were some of those issues?
Yeah, I was training so hard to fight against Rustam Khabib, which broke the hand 2 weeks before the fight. And man, I was on fire, like to fight in 2 weeks. The guy got hurt, and I don't know. I think and then my fight got rescheduled for 2 months later. And I think I overtrained a little bit, so I almost tear my ear off. My ear got stuck in the cage. I took 14 stitches behind the ear.
Wow.
And like I had a couple, I hurt my groin, kind of thing, At the day of the fight, I was 100% physically, but everything else happened during the camp, and I think it's kind of make a difference. And for the fact to be 8 months without fighting, because between Cerrone's fight and Khabib's fight was 8 months, I think it make like a difference too, for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge factor, and a lot of people wouldn't even be able to fight under those circumstances, so it's very respectable. Let's say you guys do have the rematch. How would you see the rematch playing out? What would the big difference to you be in this rematch?
Yeah, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna do a different strategy. I'm gonna focus for sure on my wrestling, which is his main game. He's gonna try to take me down and do the same thing, because I don't see all the way till he beat me. And he's gonna do that game, wrestling game against the cage, play top game. I'm gonna make sure my submission attempts gonna be sharp, my wrestling defense sharp, and looking for the knockout or submission, looking for the finish, to clean the lot of my record.
Absolutely. Well, it seems like all the choices for your next few fights are rematches. You've got Khabib Nurmagomedov, you got Donald Cerrone, you've got Anthony Pettis, and even Benson Henderson. All those guys are at the top of the division. How do you feel about that? And is it a little bit boring for you knowing that you fought and beaten most of these guys already?
Yeah, man. So those guys are the top guys, top of the division, and they are doing a good job, because they don't let anybody else come to the top. Every time that someone tries to come, they beat them, and the other guys going to the back of the line. And man, lightweight division, in my opinion, not just because I'm a champion, but in my opinion, the toughest division on the planet, man. It's the only division that if the challenge get hurt now, you can pick like 5 different guys that's gonna give him a hard time for the champion, for sure.
Now, Rafael, another guy who's recently been making a lot of waves is Conor McGregor. He's, of course, in the featherweight division, but he's always said that he plans on coming up to the lightweight division and challenging you for your title, possibly even taking it away from you. He also happens to be a fighter that you wouldn't have to rematch because you've never fought him before. From what you've seen of him so far, what did you think about those statements that he made about coming up and beating you for your title? And also, how do you think that matchup would play out between you and Conor McGregor?
Yeah, I think if you talk about Conor McGregor 1 year ago, nobody knows who is this. I don't know who is Conor McGregor 1 year ago, and he's gonna have a big test now against Aldo, and I think he's been talking a lot, but he have a big test, and I think he should take care of his business against Aldo, which is it's gonna bring him a big problem. And after that, if he beats Aldo and if he wants to come to lightweight division, I will be more than happy to welcome him.
The good thing about fighting Conor is that he sells fights a lot. You know, he really creates a huge buzz around himself and his opponents. You know, if he becomes champion, if he beats Jose Aldo, do you think that fighting Conor will be a good opportunity for you to, you know, make a lot of money and show that you can beat a huge star and also the champion of another division?
Yeah, for sure, man. It'll be great. You know, let's sell this fight. It'll be good for both of us. And so, you know, and to get this guy, it'll be good. He's featherweight division champion if he becomes the champion, and I'm a lightweight champion. And why not? You know, let's make it happen if UFC want it. And I never pick fights, you know, in my whole life. So whatever UFC said, I'm up to.
No, yeah, absolutely. And obviously that could be one of the bigger fights the UFC could make. Now, we get a lot of fighters on the show, Rafael, and they talk about Conor McGregor in a lot of different ways. Obviously, he's an outspoken guy. He likes to do a lot of trash talk. What are your thoughts on him personality-wise? Are you a fan of the trash talk that he's been doing? Were you a fan of when he grabbed Aldo's belt away from him during that press conference and all the trash talk that he says? What do you think of him on a personal level?
Yeah, man. I think he's, in my opinion, he's selling the fight, but in my opinion, he's crossing the line, you know, and he cannot defend his opponent, and he does something that he's offending Aldo, you know. I think he's taking advantage because Aldo don't speak English, you know, and while Aldo's trying to say something, like he's saying a lot of things over it. You know, and he's taking kind of advantage of it. But man, you can sell the fight. You can use many ways to sell the fight, but don't be disrespectful, man. Don't disrespect your opponent because, man, he's a martial artist, you know. I learned this, and I'm an old school guy, you know. And the one thing that I give a lot of value is respect, man. If the guy steps on the octagon, he's a man, you know. He has balls, you know, so you have to respect him.
Yeah, for sure. I've got one more question about Conor McGregor. You know, he said that he's very confident that he can beat you. In terms of the way you see the fight going, you know, do you think Conor McGregor is any threat at all to your title? And what sort of advantages do you see that you have against him in any fight?
Man, I don't know how this guy thinks that. he flatters himself too much. I don't see any way I can start the fight with him on my close guard. I can start on board, you know, whatever position he wants. There's no way he can beat me. I don't see like any way. He's a good fighter, but he needs to take care of the featherweight division first, man. Lightweight division, the shots have, you know. It better he stay on featherweight division.
Yeah, no, that's a very great point. Now, we've let the fans know that you're coming into the show, and we got a bunch of fan questions, but unfortunately, we don't have much time left, so we just picked a couple to ask you, okay, Rafael? So we got a couple of fan questions here. The first one comes from username King Ko Kong. He wants to know, how many hours a day do you train, and what's your daily meals and supplements routine like?
Yeah, like usually, like on fight camps, I train around 3-4 hours a day, and I don't like to do like long trainings, you know. I always do short practice, 45 minutes to 1 hour, you know. And so usually I do 7 to 8 meals a day, a lot of fish, no red meat, like red meat once a week, you know, and fish, brown rice, you know, quinoa, you know, a lot of good fats, avocado, nuts, and things like that.
Yeah, our diets are really similar. We had 3 pizzas last night, so you could almost say we have identical diets. Now, we've got another question from a gentleman by the name of Beer Lightweight. Beer Lightweight question is, just wanted RDA to know I'm a big fan. Recently, Bobby Green was on a radio station. He claimed he thought Rafael was using PEDs in his last fight. Just want to hear Rafael's opinion on Green and his comments.
Man, this guy, we spar couple weeks before the fight, you know, and I don't know if it was against Ben Henderson's fight, maybe his fight, something, but we spar, and he was so nice with me, like he was saying that he's a big fan of mine, and he was like so nice, you know. I thought he was a nice guy, and then when I heard that, I got surprised, and I don't know, man. Maybe I think because it's smashing, maybe he's trying that I take something. But man, he's sparred against the champion. That's the man. That's the way the champion sparring, I am the champion, man. And if he was surprised with my crash or with my power, that's why I'm a champion, man. But next time I'm not gonna take it easy on him because I spar with him 60%. Next time I go 100.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely. It was it was a really rough comment by him. Now, we have a thing that we call the tap out round, Rafael, to finish off the interview. Basically, we throw some fun questions at you, and you answer sort of with the first couple of things that come to your mind. It's like word association. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Where do you keep your title belt, and do you ever just wear it around the house? Like we had a Bellator champion, Brendan Halsey on before, and he said he likes to wear his belt. What did he say, Cass?
In the bathroom.
In the bathroom. So what's the weirdest place you've worn your title belt, and where do you keep it?
Man, I keep it, man, like on the other day, if it was on the floor of my room, but now it's on the side of my bed.
That's hilarious. Rafael, do you still train BJJ in a gi leading up to fights?
Man, I love training BJJ. I'm sad because it still has my knee hurting. But I always, after fight, I love to train with gi. I have a lot of fun.
Finish this sentence for us. People don't know that I...
I'm a Christian guy. I think many people know that. I just love to be with my family, and I just think about training and fight all day, man. I don't have many distractions on my life. I just think about fighting all day, 24/7.
Sure. Rafael, what's a movie that you could watch over and over again? What's one of your favorite movies?
Man, the one movie that made part of my life that helped me to become a fighter was Blood.
Which one?
Bloodsport.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, no, that's a classic. Now, Rafael, you're a man with lots of awesome tattoos. Just wondering if you had an opportunity to see Conor McGregor's new tiger tattoo, and what's your verdict on it?
Yeah, looks like I saw a picture. Looks like a cat.
Looks like a cat.
Good.
Yeah, it's definitely a type of cat. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of the tattoo either. Second last question is, Rafael, you've had a long career in MMA. What's your toughest fight so far?
Man, I think I had a lot of tough fight, and man, I fought with my broken ribs already, and I think when I fought a long time in Brazil, when I fought against Guida too, I broke my jaw on the first minute of the first fight, and I was able to win the first round, but man, my mouth was bleeding a lot. I was like sucking, my own blood, and it was tough. I fought all the way into the third round. It was really hard.
Now, Rafael, as you know, a lot of people refer to you by the nickname RDA because you got a cool name, but some people have issues with pronouncing it. But here at Submission Radio, we got our marketing team to come up with 3 alternative nicknames that you could potentially use in the future. So we want you to choose your favorite one out of these 3 options, okay?
Okay.
Okay, the first one is called the Rio de Janeiro Handyman. For this one, you come out to the ring with a sack full of loose screws and tools to the ring. You fix things along the way before you get to the ring, and then you give your opponent a KO fixing later in the night, okay? So that's option number 1, the Rio de Janeiro Handyman, okay? Option number 2.
Great.
Okay, option number 2. Keep your judgment until you hear all of them. Option number 2, RDA, Razor Death Angel. For this one, you have to glide from the rafters with smoke and fireworks going off in the background while a choir sings in the background, okay? So option number 2, Razor Death Angel, okay? RDA Razor. And finally, okay, and this, I don't know if this is going to be your favorite one or not, but I got to tell you this one. Finally is Purple Rain, okay? So your nickname would be Purple Rain. You come out in a purple velvet robe. Purple Rain is playing in the background. You have to grow a mustache and an afro, and as you walk to the ring, women will rush to the barricades only to be held off by security guards. When you get to the octagon, glitter comes down from the rafters. It's magical, captivating, and your opponent is so impressed he verbally submits and bows down to the master of the octagon, the man formerly known as Rafael Dos Anjos, Purple Rain. Which one do you choose?
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm between the number 1, number 2, but I'm gonna be with the number 1 because I'm from Rio de Janeiro and I can handle things. Just to get the mission, I'm gonna try to do my best to make it accomplished.
The Rio de Janeiro handyman. All right, well, also Rio de Janeiro handyman. We'll tell Bruce Buffer and we'll get it all sorted for you. Don't worry, Rafael. The final question before we let you go. There's a big card here in Melbourne in November. Tom Wright has said that it may have 1 or maybe 2 title fights. Is there any chance that we could potentially see Rafael Dos Anjos fighting in front of his Aussie fans?
Where is it? Where it be?
November.
UFC 193. It might be in a big stadium called Etihad Stadium here in Melbourne.
Well, I mean, it would be great. I never been Australia. I would love to be there one day now. I think it's the only place in the world that I never been.
Well, there you go. You definitely got to come, and obviously we'd love to have you here. Don't forget, guys, don't forget to follow Rafael on Twitter at @Dos Anjos MMA, RDOSANJOS MMA. Rafael, it's been an absolute pleasure and honor chatting with you, champ. Good luck, whoever you fight next, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, bro. Thank you for having me. All the best.
There you guys go. UFC champion, lightweight champion, RDA Rafael Dos Anjos. I wonder if he's going to come out to the ring known as Purple Rain. I know that he liked the Rio de Janeiro handyman, but I think Purple Rain, great fit for the man. He's a bit quiet, and that would really sort of put him in the Conor McGregor territory, and I think the glitter from the rafters would really just top the whole thing off.
Yeah, it's all about the glitter. It's a pretty spectacular entrance, and as much as I respect the guy, seeing him come out to Purple Rain and have such a spectacular entrance, it would definitely be quite the spectacle. So we shall see. Pretty big show. I'm really happy. We got Brendan Halsey, Bellator middleweight champion, RDA, UFC lightweight champion, new champion, so that's always exciting. And of course, Tim Kennedy's also, fun bundle of interesting things.
He's a champion to us.
He's a champion in our hearts.
He's in our hearts. He's a Tim, you're a champion in our hearts.
And at the end of the day, isn't that really what matters? I mean, isn't that worth more than any UFC title?
It's worth more than all the 20 million UFC titles that are out there. It's definitely worth more than I'm not gonna say it.
It's like a child's laughter. I mean, you can have all the money in the world, but if you can't make children laugh, then what good are you? You might as well just give up on life.
I think it's what MasterCard talks about in those priceless ads.
Yeah,
you can buy a lot of things, but you just can't buy our hearts. And that's what Tim Kennedy has. It's priceless.
Exactly. You can be a UFC champion, but it doesn't mean you're going to be on Submission Radar. It probably does, but anyway, let's talk about UFC 186. It's the card that had so many changes, so many blows to it. This was, for those who don't remember, this was at one point meant to be one of the biggest and best cards of the year. If you remember, we were supposed to be enjoying fights such as Hector Lombard versus Rory McDonald. And of course, the rematch that seems like it's in that Chris Weidman, Vitor Belfort territory between Renan Barão and TJ Dillashaw. I mean, people thought this is going to be one of those like long sagas, like a trilogy, like a Lord of the Rings, like a Star Wars. And now it just seems like a one-night stand. It happened, it's once, and then will it even happen again? So this is meant to be a huge...
I hope not.
You don't want it to happen again. You don't want to see TJ Dillashaw and Barão.
Oh, no, I do want it to happen again. It's sort of like when you think you're going to a buffet and they're going to be serving seafood, and then you get there and it turns out there's no more seafood and you just have to eat the normal stuff, which is still delicious, but you were looking forward to the seafood.
Yeah, but then you question
Hector Lombard and TJ Dillashaw, my seafood, Casper.
Yeah, then you sit there and you're like, what am I, a peasant? What is this roast beef crap? But,
yeah, that's right.
But in all honesty, this is actually a really, really good card. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Main card especially, really, really good. I think the main card was much, much better than the prelims.
Definitely, yeah.
I think pretty much all the fights delivered. But let's talk about some of the prelims. I want to open... Actually, you wanted to talk about the Aubin Mercier fight. Is that correct, Dennis?
Yeah, I'm glad that you said his name, Cass, as people that listen to the show may know. Old Dendog has issues pronouncing people's names sometimes.
Old Dendog would have called Aubin Mercier like Danny or something
Aubin
like that.
Mercier or OAM, as I'm going to call him
Yeah.
for the rest of the Well, look, I just have to say a couple of things about this guy. He's impressed me. He looked great in this fight. I think his striking's really has come a long way since Tough when he fought Chad Laprice, and obviously in the house. He's a very strong grappler. There's no surprises there, and he was very dominant in the fight with his grappling. I just think some of his striking was a bit better. He was a bit more relaxed. He's got a lot of muscle on him, and he had a bit of a tendency to be a bit stiff. And it looks like he's loosening up. I mean, it's his third win in the UFC lightweight division, I believe, Cass.
Yep.
So I just think he's coming leaps and bounds. And the other thing was, of course, I have to mention his dancing. Someplace, Ben Rothwell was watching and nodding his head in approval. Great dancing. That's all I have to say about the fight. It was a great fight for him, and I'm happy to see that he's improving in the striking. He may be someone to watch in the division if he keeps going the way that he's going.
I feel like Ben Rothwell was sitting somewhere in a dark room and he was impersonating the cop from South Park, like just sitting there watching the dancing, like, nice. Just a subtle nod and then some respect towards Aubin Mercier's dancing. You know, you mentioned Chad Laprice. I want to talk about him. He's obviously the guy that beat Aubin Mercier, became the Ultimate Fighter season, what was it, 1,380,022 or maybe 23?
It was the one where they put Canada up against Australia, strangely. It was a strange season, that one.
Yeah.
Super strange, yeah.
Chad Laprice, obviously the winner. He versus Brian Barberena. What a name, Barberena.
Who's Barberino?
I don't know.
I feel like that's somebody. Anyway, yeah, Barberena's a great name. That's like any sport or music or anything that you go into, that's a great name to have.
Brian Barberena, the double B. That's what I would call him, or that's what I would call myself if I was Brian Barberena. With this fight, you know, I noticed great kicks by Chad Laprice. He came out like a demon in the first round, just kick city, kicks to the legs, kicks to the head, kicks to the body, everything. His movement was fantastic, doing that Dominic Cruz, Frankie Edgar style movement, left and right, lots and lots of lateral movement. I really liked how Chad Laprice, he would also move back and he'd let Brian chase him, and then he'd plant his feet, he'd strike, he'd hit him with something, and then he'd move out of the way and not stand still. And a lot of the times, Brian Barberena would back away because of the strike he was hit. So Chad wouldn't even necessarily need to move out of the way. When Barberena, towards the second round, though, got on the inside, he was really good with his offense in the clinch, and he made Chad really uncomfortable. But honestly, Chad faded so much. I like this guy. I really want him to be one of those guys that comes from the Ultimate Fight and has a lot of success. Nice. It's just something that doesn't happen that often, or as often as it used to.
No way.
But by the second and third round, Chad Laprice really, really faded. By the third round, I mean, he had almost zero offense. I respect the fact that by the end, he was still throwing spinning kicks. I think he threw 2 or 3. Both of them or 3 of them missed. But I respect that he still had the heart to continue fighting, even if it was in the last few seconds. But, I mean, that was a really close fight, man. I think Chad Laprice did just enough. But if the judges saw it to Brian Barberena because of his second round and third round, I really wouldn't have complained. So, yeah, hats off to Brian Barberena because he's a really exciting fighter as well. And he really did make it a really ugly fight. And I feel like he's the guy who things didn't go his way at all in the first round. And by the end of the fight, it was completely different. The momentum had shifted and he'd found a way to make it his fight. And if there was a fourth round, I reckon Chad Laprice probably would have gotten finished.
Yeah, no, that's a great point there. It did win the fight of the night, so both men were paid nicely, and that's great to see on the prelims because obviously the guys don't get as much as on the main card. If I had to compare Chad Laprice to Aubin Mercier, and obviously they fought in the finale, I think Aubin has improved more than Chad. I think Chad is improving. I think that first round, he looked very, very good. But I agree with you. He did fade very quickly. He has won. This is his third win in the UFC, which is really great. I'd just like to see him work on some of those issues that you spoke about, Casper. I don't want to go over him again because he made a really good analysis of it all. I think he's got a lot of potential. He's a great guy, but he really does need to work on those issues. I'd like to see him work towards a finish, and I'd like to see him work on those issues, across those issues that you mentioned. But overall, between those two, I think Aubin Mercier is the more dangerous fighter. If they had a rematch, I think I'd pick Aubin Mercier in this one if they had a rematch because he has just improved a lot more than Laprice. But I'd like to see Laprice work on those holes in his game. I think he still has a lot of potential in the division. And hey, 3 straight wins in the UFC isn't too shabby.
Yeah, I think level of competition is another thing as well. I would still pick Chad Laprise in a rematch because I think even though Auburn Mercy has improved a lot, I still think Chad's improved and he still always was good. He just really needs to learn to either pace himself or develop his cardio. I'm not sure which one it is a problem for him. I mean, like I said, he came out like a beast in the first, so either he needs to tone it down in the first or just work on his cardio. But the thing is, the UFC always put him on these Canada cards, which is great, makes a lot of sense, especially the French-Canadian cards, Montreal and things like that. I really want to see a step up in competition for Chad Laprise, and it's going to be sink or swim time for Chad Laprise.
It's going to be tough as well. It's a tough division, so look, he's got some holes in his game. He's definitely not ready to go up against people in the top 10 yet, I don't think.
No.
I think a few more fights, if they can work these guys along, it's going to be very interesting. I definitely think they will rematch at some point, and it'll be interesting to see who gets the upper hand in that one when they do.
Let's talk about Sarah Kaufman versus Alexis Davis. Sarah Kaufman, obviously being the hometown girl, being the Canadian, she won the first 2 fights. Davis, in this case, got the revenge. I thought, honestly, leading into this fight, I really did think Alexis Davis was going to win just because Kaufman, she's such a veteran, and I feel like she's slowing down in her career. But to her credit, she actually looked really good. She had a great first round. I feel like towards the second round, Alexis Davis really started to take over, started to school her a little bit, especially on the ground, and she won with that awesome belly down Russian armbar. The tap from Kaufman was one of the faintest things I've ever seen. I mean, she should have tapped with her feet or tapped verbally. Dennis and myself, especially myself, we've been submitted so many times, and I'm never afraid to tap, and yell out if I need to, because I don't want my arm broken. I don't want something injured.
I had someone tickle my balls once when I put them in a guillotine because their arms are stuck, and the only way they could tap was by tickling my balls.
And he was a cop, wasn't he?
He was a cop.
Wow.
It was like 3 times my size. Oh, man. It was... And I didn't know what he was trying to do. I thought he was... Because I was fairly new to jiu-jitsu at that point. I thought he was trying some weird move on me that had to do with my testicles. Monkey steals peaches or something. But yeah, you got to tap any way you can, I guess. Yeah.
So you got him in a guillotine. He tickled your balls. Needless to say, you both finished.
Yeah, that's right. And not only that, I held onto the guillotine because I enjoyed the sensation of submitting someone and getting my balls tickled.
Yeah, fuck the police. But with this one, my biggest beef was with the referee. He went to the wrong angle. When you've got an armbar like that, he needed to be on the other side. Now, I'm not sure whether Jaron Vallel isn't versed with the jiu-jitsu, what the deal was, or maybe it was just a brain fart. But when you look at the replay and you see the way the armbar is happening, it's like he went to the back. I don't know what he was thinking. I feel like it's almost as if someone's like, I'm going to show you how to do a triangle, and you go, yep, cool, I'm going to stand behind you. It's just, it doesn't work. What were your thoughts, Dennis?
Yeah, look, I agree with you, man. He was in the wrong position. He really should know better, but I don't know. I got, for some reason, in that position, because I was looking at it, and it is a tough one to catch. I mean, if he was in the right position, I'm sure he would have caught it sooner. But out of all the screw-ups that I see from the referees, I think I might give him a pass on this one. But yeah, it's a tough one because you don't want to see someone getting hurt. And also with the armbar, it's one of those moves you can't go light on it because if you do, the person will escape and end up on top. So I have nothing against Alexis Davis for putting it in until he got stopped. That's the only thing you can do with an armbar. You can't let him go. So look, it's a tough one. I'm sure he'll learn from it. And yeah, I just don't like seeing those situations happen. Hopefully she didn't get too badly hurt.
Well, yeah, no, that's something that I was looking for after the fight. I was like, shit, because she grabbed her arm straight away and grabbed her elbow. But afterwards, she was walking around. She seemed fine. She wasn't clenching her arm. And she's a warrior, so she'll be fine. I think with Jaron Vallel, he's made a few boo-boos in a few recent fights. So I think, he needs to work on a few things.
Yeah, they're going to take him out back and have a chat with him. The old shotgun, old lassie chat. But I was going to say that Alexis Davis, she did win the fight, but at the start, she just didn't look that good. I mean, in the end, she did win with that armbar, and she's been out of the octagon for a while, actually, Cass. I mean, she last fought Ronda Rousey at UFC 175, which was June 5th in 2014. So that's a pretty long layoff. I'd like to see Sarah get some more fights back to back. She obviously probably had some ring rust in this one. It was a good win for her because she lost previously twice to Sarah. But if she wants to make another run at that title, I'd just like to see her a bit more frequently in that octagon. I guess the ring rust was a factor in this one, but good thing that she got the win. Nevertheless, still a feather in her cap, I guess.
No, yeah, definitely a feather. A nice kicks. I really respect the kicks. And I feel like they're going to take Jaron Vallel out back. And it's going to be like a scene from that movie Three Kings. There's going to be like a car battery, and either nipples or testicles, or something's gonna be electrocuted, and there's gonna be a guy asking questions and ending it with my good man. What are you thinking, my good man?
There'll be a guy asking why he's not wearing a ribbon. He's not wearing a ribbon.
Like in Seinfeld.
Yeah, that's it.
Let's talk about the next fight.
He'll be like Kramer at the end when he's trying to run away.
Yeah. Thomas Almeida versus Yves Jaboin. I loved how aggressive Thomas Almeida was. Just came in there, really staying true to that shoot box style. I feel like Yves was smart though in using the aggressiveness against Almeida early on, and he got that takedown. Almeida rushed in, and Yves just timed it really beautifully, took him to the ground, couldn't do much of it. And then once the fight came back to standing, Almeida was just like glue. Just anything that Yves would go for, Almeida would counter. He would time him. He countered a lot, and he just didn't let Yves get off on anything. Few fun facts. Thomas Almeida, he moves to 19-0. He's never been defeated in his career. Most of his fights have been in Brazil, and I'd be lying if I said I knew much about the competition. They're all local guys. I mean, you can have UFC cards in Brazil, and even then, I don't know all the talent. So these guys, I can't tell you how good or bad the competition was, but his first 13 fights were won in the first round by the KO or submission. So super impressed with Thomas Almeida. Of course, he was the one who was supposed to fight Uriah Faber, and then things fell through. Uriah clarified and showed that he did not turn that fight down. We'll see if they do meet in the future, because this is a guy, he's like we said, he's like Owen Wilson in Zoolander. He's so hot right now in this 135 division. We'll see if he does face Uriah Faber sometime.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with you. And that's a great analysis of the fight there, Cash. Only thing I want to add there is I personally thought the finish was a bit early. I feel like the fight was finished a bit early. I looked back at the replay. It looked like Yves was rocked, but I'd like to see the fighters get a bit more of an opportunity to fight back. I know he didn't protest it, which must mean that he agreed with it, but I think a lot of other fighters in a similar position might be a bit disappointed.
I think that Yves was honest with himself. I think he was overmatched. And the thing is, it wasn't like it was just that flurry against the cage. He was getting pieced up in general. And I think, to be honest, Yves was he didn't look bad, to be honest. But I think he was happy that it was over. I think he was like, yeah, this guy had my number. And I don't think it was a bad stoppage, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I was at I watched it at the pub with some people, and every single person in that pub was having a go at that stoppage.
Really?
So I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it just depends. I'll tell you what, though. I think, Yves was very honest with himself. I think a lesser fighter would have started complaining about it and maybe use it as an excuse. So more power to him for not complaining and just admitting the truth. Don't see that very often in MMA.
Yeah, the pitchforks were lit where you were watching the fight. Speaking of stoppages and referees, I want to talk about John Makdessi versus Shane Campbell. This, to me, was a really intriguing and a really, really exciting fight. You had Shane Campbell coming out like a beast, leg kick city, just absolutely piecing up John Makdessi's legs. And that's the thing, John Makdessi, he came in, he had a really great entry into the UFC, the Bull, and since then he's been very sort of hit and miss, and he really has struggled once his opponents get their momentum and can keep him at bay. There was a really bad takedown by Shane Campbell after having success on the feet, which I found really, really strange. It was just destroying John Makdessi, and then he went for this really, really far out takedown. I have no idea why that happened. Makdessi was basically getting picked apart until he cornered Shane, countered his leg kick with a right hook. So I was very, very impressed with Makdessi for actually, like in one of the other fights, I don't remember what we were talking about before, but like one of the other fights, he overcame the adversity and he won the fight in a pretty spectacular fashion. The one thing that I want to mention, though, that Shane Campbell did go for a takedown. John Makdessi stuffed it, but he did grab the cage, and the referee didn't do anything. Now, the big question is, I'm not saying Shane Campbell would have necessarily won, but I mean, he was rocked, but he wasn't completely out. So he very well may have recovered had he gotten that takedown. So it's another disappointing effort on the referee's part. Nevertheless, I can't take anything away from John Makdessi. Shane Campbell looked great. He looked spectacular. He'll be back. And I believe he took the fight on short notice. Abel Trujillo was supposed to fight instead. So I think Shane Campbell, on a proper fight camp and proper training and more notice, he's going to look fantastic. And John Makdessi, I mean, hats off to him. It takes a lot of balls and it takes a lot of heart to make a comeback after really getting pieced up like that.
Yeah, no, that's great. It was a pivotal point that obviously was overlooked by the ref cast. I did noticed that as well and wished that something was said about it. But I'll tell you what, Shane Campbell, super tough guy. He's won a whole bunch of Muay Thai championships in America. Oh, it looks like almost every other year from 2006 to 2013, he won some sort of Muay Thai championship. So he had a tough jaw on him, and he took a lot of punishment. You know, he really hung in there, and you got to give the guy a lot of credit. In the end, McDessie, though, I was just really impressed with how calm he was. I mean, he approached it very, very calmly. He picked his shot very, very nicely to finish it off. And you got to give it to him, because most guys will blow their load in a situation like that, maybe be exhausted, maybe just go for broke and then never really capitalize on the opportunity. So John did a great job in that situation, and I had to come off to him. And I agree with you, Cass. Shane, you know, he has a lot of potential. If he has a big training camp, he may very well show us that potential in his next fight. So excited to see what happens with him next.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of the next fight, Michael Bisping versus CB Dollaway, I don't know about you, but by the time this fight came on, I felt like the pay-per-view was going really quickly. I was like, wow, Bisping and Dollaway already. Which just goes to show that it was a really good and exciting card, and all the fights were exceeding expectations. What did you think of this fight? You know, there was a lot of trash talk on Michael Bisping's part, not so much on CB Dollaway. I feel like Michael Bisping, if he wasn't a fighter, he could be a great salesman. I feel like he can sell anything. He can really sell any fight, even if there's no beef there. He can somehow either manufacture some or just make it interesting and make you want to tune in. What did you think of this fight, Dennis?
Yeah, well, you know, first and foremost, on Michael Bisping, you and me, Cass, we worked closely with him leading into UFC Sydney. I did a little press conferences with him and interviews, and there's just something special about the guy. When he walks into the room, all of a sudden everybody just lightens up a bit. There's a good atmosphere in the room. He's got one of those personalities that's infectious. I imagine that's what it would be like if like the president of America, or like one of the top people, I don't know, Brad Pitt walked in through. I don't know.
He's very good at what he does. Yeah,
very special. Yeah, something very special about him. And he sells fights very well. And in this one, he sold it very well yet again. He found a reason. He found something that CB Dollaway said about him, and he really expanded it and had some trash talk with him, and that was great. Look, I said some stuff about CB Dollaway on a previous show after he lost to Machida, where I said I don't see him having much of a future in the middleweight division. Maybe I was emotional or passionate at that time, but I felt like he didn't have much of an opportunity against Michael Bisping. Obviously, Michael fought Chael Sonnen previously and showed off his wrestling chops. I actually thought he might have actually beaten Chael Sonnen in that fight. It was very, very close, but he had amazing takedown defense, and I really thought CB Dollaway, all he had was his wrestling, and without it, Michael Bisping would just use his footwork to pick him apart and, you know, make it a short night. And, man, I was just absolutely blown away by CB Dollaway. Look, he still isn't a great striker. He's very stiff, and he just stands in the pocket. There's not enough movement from him. He doesn't have much footwork, or as much as he really should have, but he was really in that fight to win it, and he had some great exchanges. Obviously, he skimmed Michael across the face, and he fell over backwards. Don't think that Michael was as rocked as the commentators would lead you to believe, but he did a great job. I mean, he took Michael down at a lot of periods in the fight. He was in there, and he was trying to win it, and for certain parts of the fight, it looked like he had a great shot. Obviously, Michael is a pro. He still looked great in a lot of positions. He came back to dominate CB in that last round and really put an exclamation point on the fight. Overall, I thought the fight was really good. I think even though CB Dollaway lost it, he gained a lot of respect from that fight. Maybe even more respect than when he had some of his more dominant victories, like his KO win previously, because this was a fight against a guy like Michael Bisping, who is very, very respected in the sport. He really stood toe-to-toe for him. I think he's improved quite a bit, and I'm actually excited to see what he does next. For Michael Bisping, this was a big win for him. I was thinking in the fight when he got rocked, man, if he loses this one, this is not good for Bisping, because his fight with Luke Rockhold was absolutely terrible. This one, he came back, he won it, so it still looks like he has a bright future in the middleweight division. There's a lot of fun fights he can still have. What about you, Cass? When you saw that Michael Bisping and CB Dollaway were versing each other, did you give Dollaway much of a chance?
I immediately thought this is a favorable matchup to Michael Bisping, just because he really only loses to top guys. He really only loses to guys that are either champions or contenders or just elite guys. And I just haven't seen anything from CB Dollaway to really put him there just yet. He was on a good streak. He had some great fights, but he wasn't in that top 5, top 6 of the middleweight division just yet. So I just thought Michael Bisping's the type of guy you just really don't want to bet against him. I mean, Brian Stan, when he was still fighting, like, he was a very effective striker, and Michael Bisping absolutely pieced him apart. You mentioned the Chael Sonnen fight. So I really thought, look, this should be a good fight for Michael Bisping, but the thing is, Michael Bisping is getting up there in age. He was the winner of The Ultimate Fighter Season 3. I mean, he's fighting guys like Elvis Sinisic and light heavyweight back in the day. He's getting up there in age. So my biggest question mark for this fight was, is this the fight, or are we coming to that point where Michael Bisping has taken enough damage in his career? I mean, he took that big head kick from Luke Rockhold. He got submitted. Is Michael Bisping slowing down? And this was his big comeback fight. I think Bisping looked great, but I also thought CB Dollaway looked great as well. CB was looking to use his leg kicks, his big, powerful leg kicks against Bisping, and Bisping was obviously very smart, veteran move. He was circling away from the power kicks. I don't think CB Dollaway was very phased. He was looking to land that big left all night long, and he landed it quite a few times. Like you said, he dropped Bisping. I was very impressive with Bisping's recovery as well. He really didn't stress. He didn't freak out. He didn't panic. He was always in the fight. He wasn't like you said, he wasn't as rocked as the commentator said. It was a great first round.
He finished out the round as well, Bisping. He came back and he finished out the round quite well as well.
Yeah, CB Dollaway, he got a takedown at the second round. I wish he got it earlier. He got it, and he got it nicely. And I just really wish he got it earlier and controlled Michael Bisping. And also, there was a point where CB, I think after he dropped Michael Bisping, he should have gotten on top, and I think he should have stayed on top. I think he could have grinded it out. And obviously, we saw that CB Dollaway does have that ability. He had a pretty horrible fight against Jason Mayhem Miller years ago. It's the one that led to Jason Mayhem Miller's release. But he can grind fighters out. One thing I have to say, Michael Bisping's wrestling is criminally underrated. He's always had good wrestling. And I think against Kung Lee, people saying that Kung Lee had the grappling advantage, or at least the takedown defense, I was like, this is insanity. Michael Bisping has very, very good wrestling, especially for an English fighter who didn't start off with wrestling. I mean, we'll remember Matt Hamill just absolutely taking it to him, and guys, The Ultimate Fighter. The difference for me in this one, you could see by the end of the fight, Dollaway's kicks to the body were very slow, and they were getting caught, and he was just looking to counter-strike against Bisping. And against a volume striker like Bisping, I mean, that's usually not going to end well. Unless you're extremely precise, you're probably going to get outworked, and Bisping just has so much volume. So the difference for me here was Bisping's superior striking, cardio, and volume were too much for CB Dollaway. I don't think CB Dollaway falls too far down the ladder, because it was a really good fight, and this would have been my other pick for fight of the night. Great fight. Third most wins in middleweight history, and possibly the most paid fighter in UFC history as far as disclosed pay. I haven't checked what the disclosed pay was, but I was reading something the other day where I believe Michael Bisping has, in his career in the UFC, officially disclosed pay, been paid $4,810,000, whereas Anderson Silva was paid $5,097,000. So if Bisping picks up another, I don't know, $200,000 or so dollars, he will officially be the highest paid fighter in the UFC when it comes to disclosed pay. That's obviously not talking about pay-per-view points or sponsors or anything like that. And if you didn't know, Talis Leites tweeted out he wants to fight Michael Bisping next. It's something we've spoken to Talis Leites about in the past, and he was always kind of, yeah, sure, no worries. Now it seems like he really wants the fight. So great fight in general, and I'm curious to see if they put up Michael Bisping against Talis Leites.
Yeah, that would be a great fight, and I'd love to see that fight. The big question for me with Bisping is that eye. What's the deal with the eye? Does it affect him? Can he see as well out of it as he used to before the whole injury happened? We've obviously interviewed him before. People can see that his eye looks different. It doesn't obviously look as straight. So I don't know if his vision's 100% like he used to be, but it still certainly seems like he can see those punches coming. And I think as long as that eye is able to catch those punches and he's not a little bit blind on that side, I'd like to see him keep on fighting. But it was a big win. And like you mentioned, Cass, it doesn't take a lot away from CB Dollaway. I think this is probably the biggest fight of his career. I think this fight has probably done the most for him out of any one of his fights in the UFC. And he's been in the UFC for a really, really long time. And he's had a couple of dominant finishes. But I think this is the fight that put him on the stage, and the fight that really got the fans to look at him and see what he could do against a guy like Bisping. So I think he earned a lot of respect, and if he does well in his next fight, well, he can still be in that contention to, start working his way up the ladder again. But I think it was a good showing from CB, like you mentioned.
Well, I think what it showed was that he can hang. He can hang with the guys, the upper echelon in the division, because thus far he never had any kind of tests like that, other than Lyoto Machida, and obviously we know how that went, but it was a very close fight against a very good fighter. So it shows that he still can hang. And as far as Bisping's eye, one thing that I noticed, it looked a lot better it looked a lot clearer, because previously when you saw pictures of Michael Bisping, like obviously interviewing him in Sydney when he was down there, I mean, I could barely see his eye. It was very closed, it was very dark, and you could really see a clear difference between the two. And now in these interviews and things that he's doing, even in the Countdown show, the Embedded, you could just see his eye. It's like he wasn't as nervous to show his eye. Even when we interviewed him, he wanted to stand on a certain side because that was his better side. And now I can see it. I can see the color in it. I think the Bisping did get caught with a few punches that maybe the old Bisping wouldn't have. But that's the big question, man, because depth perception in the fight game is everything.
Yeah, and it's those punches coming from the angles. Now, that's right. The retina was huge, I think, when we interviewed him. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens next. Now, Cass, the co-main event of the fight almost didn't happen. Quinton Rampage Jackson versus Fabio Maldonado. Quinton ended up getting put back into the fight sort of pretty soon, pretty close to the event. So they had to do it at a catch weight. It was 215 pounds. I mean, a lot of people didn't really expect Quinton to be in the best of shape. Obviously, we've seen him gas out in previous fights on multiple occasions. So especially in this situation where he's not on weight, a lot of people didn't expect much from him. Going into this one, I still thought he was going to have Fabio Maldonado's number. I thought it was going to be an exciting fight, a barn burner. I was telling everybody this is going to be a barn burner, two guys swinging punches at each other. It really was more strategic than I thought it'd be, and it turned out to be quite a good fight. I was impressed with Quinton Rampage Jackson. He actually mixed it up really, really well. Some great punches to the body, some great stuff in the clinch. He even threw some kicks there. Fabio Maldonado didn't really take off. I don't know whether it was because maybe it was star factor. He mentioned he's always wanted to fight Rampage, even back, he mentioned, I think as far as 2003, he always wanted to fight him. So maybe it was a dream coming true, and he was just a little bit stunted in the fight. But I just feel like he never really got off. I mean, a lot of his punches, obviously he's a boxer, so a lot of his punches were from a close distance. He was working the body over, but really had no shot at stopping Rampage with those kind of punches. Rampage has a superb chin. I thought it was a really good performance from Rampage. I think it was a good return from him, especially considering it was at a catch weight. What did you think of the fight, Cass?
I don't think it showed too much. I didn't love it, to be perfectly honest. I like to see Rampage. When he threw the first kick, my jaw was on the floor. I was like, what? Rampage throwing a kick? And the fact that he did it more in the fight, as the fight went on, I was really surprised. He used the Muay Thai clinch. He showed decent boxing. He showed good head movement. Just the one thing that, and I don't want to take anything of Rampage, because obviously he had a very tumultuous ride to get to this pay-per-view. He himself, though, said that he never stopped training. So in a way, I mean, on one hand, he's saying that he never stopped training. On the other hand, he says, you have no idea what I went to get through. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But the other thing is, Fabio Maldonado, in my opinion, is like a tailor-made matchup. Almost like a Joey Beltran, but with much better boxing. I was very, very disappointed to see Fabio Maldonado, like you said, just not get off. He didn't get going. I feel like he was setting Rampage up for something that just never came. In the second round, he looked to really slow Rampage down. I feel like Rampage was very lazy in the clinch, though. There was one point where he had Fabio Maldonado against the cage, and Fabio Maldonado reversed it with ease, and then he was looking to tire him out. He was landing some body shots and really leaning on him and trying to slow him down. And then in the third round, he really just did nothing. I mean, it's one thing to sort of, get beat up and take a lot of punishment and get counted, but I feel like Maldonado just never even threw anything. There was times where he was beckoning Rampage to come on and hit me and slapping his head and things like that, but he didn't do anything. Even if Maldonado's idea was to counter-strike with him, which didn't certainly look like it, he didn't throw the strikes afterwards anyway. So I was very puzzled by what Maldonado did. The other thing is Maldonado, I mean, he had the full training camp. I understand, obviously, his opponent changed, but like with Rampage, it was, okay, you're fighting, then you're not fighting, then you're fighting again. But with Maldonado, it was either Rampage or Steve Barcet. He always had an opponent. So it's not like Maldonado had an excuse to say, oh, look, I wasn't fit or I wasn't in condition or anything like that. I was disappointed by his performance, especially from all the stuff that he said prior to the fight. He seemed very excited. He said he wanted to blood. I didn't watch the post-fight press conference, but I'm curious to hear what Maldonado said and thought about his performance. With Rampage, I mean, to me, it doesn't say anything. He's back in the UFC. Good. Rampage is a star. I think that's where he should be. I mean, I thought he was going to knock Maldonado out. He didn't. He showed some decent striking. I feel like Rampage, I feel like he gasped, but he actually woke up in the third, which I was actually really impressed with. I didn't expect that from Rampage. So we'll see. We'll see what a Rampage Jackson can do on a full training camp with the proper training and nutrition and all those kinds of things. To me, it's still a big question mark. I'm not about to say, look, Rampage is going to be competing with the elite. I think Fabio Maldonado was a slam dunk for him. It was an alley-oop. He didn't exactly slam dunk it, but it wasn't unimpressive. So we'll see what happens in the next fight.
Yeah, look, man, I got to disagree with you. I really thought Rampage looked really good. I mean, considering everything that he went through and not being on weight, I thought he looked a lot better than I've seen him in a lot of his latest fights. I thought, obviously, a lot of the fights that we saw him in, there were different excuses. The Ryan Bader fight, he had knee issues. A lot of those Bellator fights didn't really go that well. One of them was in heavyweight, but it was obviously, I think it was against Joey Beltran, wasn't it, that he fought at heavyweight in Bellator? I'm pretty sure.
No, it was light heavyweight.
Light heavyweight? Okay. But he did fight at heavyweight for one fight, I think. I don't think he went down to light heavyweight. But
actually, you know what? Sorry, you're right. Sorry, Joe Beltran was a catchweight, 210 pounds. No, you're right.
Yeah. But I actually thought this is the best Rampage I've seen in a really long time. I mean, he checked some kicks, he mixed it up. Usually, I expect Rampage to be really, really predictable and just have the boxing, but I think he's starting to mix it up again. I thought. Because the other thing with me was, I thought Fabio Maldonado didn't have much of a shot, but he wasn't as much of a give me as people expect. Like, he's got a really tough chin, so I didn't think Rampage had as much of a chance of knocking him out as a Joey Beltran. So I was actually really pleased with how he looked. I mean, I honestly expected him to be absolutely gassed by the third round. I was impressed by the fact that he had a lot more energy than I expected him to, and I was impressed by the fact that he mixed it up. But then again, from another perspective, I'm also of the mindset that I don't expect much from Rampage Jackson anymore. I saw him as a shell of his former self and didn't really expect to see much from him in this return. So maybe he just surprised me and I had a lot lower expectations from him than you did.
I think that's another factor. When Rampage talks before a fight, I don't listen at all. I mute it because Rampage is another guy who's good at selling fights. He's good at getting people excited. But I feel like I've gotten excited for his fights one too many times, and he said things like, I'm going to be the old Rampage Jackson, I'm going to come in and pride and slams and blah, 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 blah. And I just can't listen to that stuff anymore. So much like you, I don't have any expectations when Rampage fights. And the other thing is, look, he didn't look great against, say, Ryan Bader and, of course, John Jones. And, there was that disappointing fight with Rashad Evans. It was pretty boring. And then there was Matt Hamill where, he had a good fight against him. But, again, people were saying that he'll probably knock Matt Hamill out. I just feel like a lot of those guys, they were wrestlers. And Fabio Maldonado wasn't a wrestler. And he still managed to take Rampage Jackson down, which to me was like, wow, like Rampage has fantastic takedown defense. So he has a good sprawl. He's very, very strong. So I was surprised to see Fabio Maldonado take him down.
That was a terrible takedown as well. That was like
it was sloppy.
Yeah, it just fell over. It looked like he just fell on him.
It was like a trip from the clinch. Yeah, I think that's another thing that made me watch that fight and go, oh, really? Like that wasn't pretty. I just think that with Fabio Maldonado, Rampage fought the way he did because he didn't have to worry about the takedown. If he fought Ryan Bader again, I guarantee you would not see the same Rampage. You wouldn't be throwing knees. He wouldn't be throwing any kicks. And Rampage has said the same thing. He says he doesn't throw leg kicks because of wrestlers and of the threat of the takedown. I'm not a fighter, but you still can throw leg kicks if you mix it up enough.
No, that's a great point. I guess we'll have to wait and see who they put him up with next. Hopefully my hunch is right and Rampage is still sort of close to his prime because, like I said, for a while there, I thought that was it, and I just saw him as one of those showcase fighters. But who knows? Maybe he's got a small run left in him. Obviously, I don't think he'll be fighting a John Jones, but it looks like there's some fun fights in there for him. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see. The other thing I like about Rampage being back is he looks really grateful to be back in the UFC. I think there was a period there where he was sort of taking it all for granted and thought there were greener pastures elsewhere. Now that he's back in the UFC, I think he's going to try and make the most of this opportunity, not only to make money, because we all know Rampage is very motivated by the paycheck. I think he wants to finish out his career on a higher note than he thought it was going to finish in Bellator.
Yeah, well, he's going to win a lot of fans like that because a lot of fans, I mean, you see people talking on the internet and a lot of people don't like Rampage because they see him as a complainer. And I think now you see Rampage in there, he's happy. Look, we'll just see how we go because he was happy in Bellator for what seemed like quite a while. He was loving, who was before Scott Coker? Bjorn Rebney. I was loving Bjorn Rebney. I mean, I'm the type of guy, I just want everything to be peaceful, so I'm hoping that him and the Dana White and the Fertitta brothers, I hope they're all happy and everything, and Rampage finishes his career off nicely in the UFC, because at the end of the day, he's a big star, and it always felt to me like him in Bellator was a waste of a star.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a waste of a star. It's great to see him back home. Now, Cass, the main event, Demetrius Johnson versus Hirogochi, people didn't really expect Demetrius to lose this one. Obviously, he was mentioned by many as pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. I think he is one of the best pound for pound fighters in the world. I think he's up there with John Jones and Jose Aldo. Absolutely. He's just so dominant. What did you think of this matchup? What were your takeaways from it?
Man, I was actually really excited for this one just because Kyoji Hiroguchi, he's so different. I really did give Mighty Mouse all the advantages in this fight, just purely because with a guy like Hiroguchi, I mean, he is awkward and he does come in and out a lot, but I thought that if Mighty Mouse could get in there and sort of be tactical and take him down to the ground, he would exploit his ground game. And that's pretty much what happened. I mean, I was so impressed with Mighty Mouse catching Hiroguchi's kick, taking him all the way to the cage. I mean, the one thing I can say about Mighty Mouse is he just doesn't really make mistakes. And in this fight, he kept so much pressure. The fantastic level changes. I mean, the crowd was booing a lot when Mighty Mouse got inside control, but to me, I didn't understand that, because that's where he gets most of his submissions from. You know, the Kimuras, the armbars, as we saw in this fight. I mean, the finish, look, he's not necessarily the most exciting fighter, Mighty Mouse, but he's just a guy that does everything right. He's one of those guys, like, if you work in the office, he's that guy that just comes in, not the best looking, not the funniest, not Mr. Personality, but he comes in there, he's always on time, he does his job, and he does a really good job, and he submits everything on time, and that's kind of like what Mighty Mouse is. You know, he's not getting like crazy finishes, and he's not taking wild risks, but that's what makes him so good. And it's hard to be a guy like that. You know, if the crowd is booing, and if you know that you're not necessarily a big draw, it's hard not to get swayed by that, and it's hard not to go, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to start throwing crazy kicks and taking all these big risks. And Mighty Mouse just never, ever goes off plan. To me, I think he's still an exciting fighter, but that last second submission, that is insane. He was clearly winning the fight. He was clearly going to get the decision, and you could hear his corner yelling, armbar, go for the armbar, and then he actually went for it, got it. And I was like, oh man, is he going to hold out? Because I was thinking, like, if he does, at least this way he can, you know, maintain that he went to decision with Mighty Mouse, and he had to tap in the last second. So that right there makes the fight that much more impressive. And you can't really hate on the fight for being boring, because this fight just made history. That is probably never ever going to be beaten ever in the history. You know, you've only got so many minutes in the fight. Unless the UFC introduces 7-round fights, you are probably never ever going to be able to get a stoppage later than that. So Mighty Mouse just made history. My only beef is with Joe Rogan saying that he's the greatest fighter in the world. I disagree with that. I would have to say John Jones is. And yeah, it's just, I understand what the UFC are doing. They're trying to promote everything, and they're trying to get everybody on the Mighty Mouse bandwagon, but you can't have two greatest fighters in the world. You know, it's either one or the other. You can have a lot of guys at the top, but in my opinion, it's John Jones, clearly.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. John Jones is definitely, in my opinion as well, pound for pound, the greatest, just because of the dominant ways that he's beaten the best of the best over and over and over. But, you know, with this fight, Hiroguchi actually had a really good first round. After that first round, I thought, hey, we've got a fight on our hands. But then Demetrius Johnson just does what he does in all of his fights, and then just absolutely demolishes his opponent with his work rate and the rest of the fight. I mean, I know the crowd was booing, and I heard in the post-fight press conference, one of the reporters said in the fourth round, people got up and actually left the arena.
Wow.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is the fight game. And if people boo because they're not entertained, Demetrius Johnson's job isn't to make sure that you guys are screaming. His job is to do the best, you know, the best possible thing he can in that octagon and win the fight. And at that, he is the best. He did a great job. That submission at the end showed that he's hungry for the finish, which I think a lot of those people missed out on, that got up and left in the middle of the fourth round. And, you know, he deserves everybody's respect because he's such a great martial artist. I understand why people are booing. There's a lot of really casual fans that say, hey, I'm watching this to be entertained. But what people need to understand as well is this is a sport, and I see MMA as a sport more than prize fighting. I see it more as a sport like the AFL, NFL, NBA. And as a sport, I think he did a really, really great job. You're not always going to have the most exciting things happen, but to a lot of guys that were watching it, guys that love wrestling, guys that wrestle, guys that do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they were very fascinated with the fight. A lot of the stuff that he did was picture perfect, like you mentioned, Casper, and stuff that people found really, really entertaining, that are really into certain aspects of the sport. So at the end of the day, I thought it was a great win for him. The only thing I'm worried about is who's he going to fight next? Because it just feels like he's gone through the division. I'm hoping they could build some contenders for him. I don't think he should be headlining pay-per-views just because it puts a lot of pressure on him and there's a lot of negativity that comes with that. I'd always keep him at a co-main event spot. Obviously, they had no choice because TJ Dillashaw had to pull out. But overall, I was just very, very impressed. He's a great fighter, and I just don't see anybody beating him anytime soon. And Hiragachi, he was only 24 years old. He's a really young kid. He's still got his whole career in front of him. I was watching videos of him wrestling at AKA. He's certainly very talented. I'm sure we might see him back there versus him one more time if he could put together a string of wins. But overall, I thought it was a great performance from Dimitri.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, as far as who he's going to fight next, I hope John Dodson wins his next fight so they can set up that rematch. Because John Dodson, other than his injuries, and I can't believe that he tore his ACL, but other than his injuries, he's looked absolutely phenomenal. And I think that's a fight that people would actually be interested in.
That's a big one. That's a huge fight. I forgot about John Dodson. Yeah, that has to be the fight next. Hopefully he wins. That would be huge.
Look, as far as the stance on MMA being a sport rather than prize fighting, I would have to disagree. I think what happens in the cage is definitely all sport, but I think everything surrounding it, from the build-up to the pay-per-view structure to the drama to the countdown shows to everything to the press, all that kind of stuff, I think that's all prize fighting. And I think if you look at the way society is going, everybody wants something quickly, and it's all about clickbait and can we get you to watch our stuff. There's like you got YouTube, you got all these like people who are just nobodies and they're making their own shows and people are loving it. So it's very hard to compete with that. And I think if you take like all these other traditional martial arts, whether it's karate, BJJ, and things like that, you don't have anything close to the UFC. Even Metamoris doesn't compare to anything like the UFC is, because people aren't just that interested in a straight up sports approach. So you need that drama. You need two guys that hate each other. I mean, something I want to quickly mention at the end is also the Ultimate Fighter, Black Zillions versus ATT. One thing I find intriguing about that is the coaches. They hate each other. I don't know that much about Glenn Robinson, and I don't know that much about Dan, but I know they hate each other, and if they fought, I would tune in purely because of that reason. Now, I think it's a fine line with Mighty Mouse, because on one hand, he's a guy going to do his job. You can't really ask for much else. I mean, he's a fantastic fighter. He's winning. He's setting these kinds of records. You can't really ask much else for him. So I think in that sense, the responsibility falls on the UFC. They have to market this guy the right way. And I mean, I can't really fault them with anything, because they are trying to do that. They are trying to hype him up. They are trying to put together a big countdown show with him as the focus and things like that. It's just the public isn't that interested. And I don't think that's Mighty Mouse's fault. However, if you want to be the employee of the month, and if you want to get a promotion and a raise, like with any job, you have to do something that's extra special. And that's where a guy like Conor McGregor comes in, and he's like an innovator. He's doing new and crazy and exciting things, and that's why he's getting paid the crazy big bucks as opposed to Mighty Mouse. But in saying that, I can't fault Mighty Mouse, because he's got a very clear objective. He wants to be known as a good guy. He wants to be respectful. He does not want to talk shit about his opponents. And look, it is what it is. If he's not going to, then the UFC have to change their approach, or they just have to find another way to market him.
Nah, I agree with you. Look, I think that, and what really frustrates me, because we're on the topic now, so we might as well talk about it, is the whole prize fighting idea. I mean, my idea of MMA, and there's obviously, like, you disagree with me, and there's a lot of people have a different opinion on it, but I think the people that should be showcased are the people who are the best at it. And what annoys me with MMA in modern days is when there are guys who do trash talk, but they're not very talented, and they get pushed ahead of the guys who are more talented in fighting. So Conor McGregor, I think he is in both categories, because even though he's a great talker, he's also a very good fighter. But there's a lot of situations where there are other guys who are just pushed because of their fight, because of their promotion skills. And that's what really frustrates me about MMA. I mean, I know that it is for entertainment purposes, but I'd really like to see in the future the MMA to be treated like a sport, because I think it loses some of its credibility when, and I mean, we've spoken about this before, Casper, about a bunch of people, and there's plenty of guys like CM Punk and other guys in there that, carry the discussion, guys like Brock Lesnar and stuff. But I think if you push too many guys just based on their trash talk who aren't talented, it's going to take the credibility away from the sport, and you'll become, you go back in time, and I guess a lot of companies like Bellator putting together fights like Ken Shamrock versus Kimbo Slice are in danger of taking away credibility from their company. And I think I like the way the UFC has approached it as of late, where they have sort of a showcase approach where there's exhibition fights with guys like, not exhibition fights, but they bring guys back like Crow Cop, and they don't give them tough competition for entertainment purposes. But my gripe, and this is always going to be with me, I'm not sure what you think about this, Cass, is when people who are better at fighting get held down by people who are better at promoting. Because I want to see the best fighters fight each other. I don't want to see the best trash talkers get ahead of the curve. And I mean, we saw it with Chael Sonnen. He got the John Jones fight. He got a bunch of other fights, which I didn't mind as much in the Chael Sonnen situation. But there are situations that it frustrates me. And I understand Dana White's got a business and that he has to, keep the numbers up and make sure that the people are watching. But at the same time, I get frustrated a lot when they push guys like that. You know what I mean?
I understand where you're coming from, but the thing, my question to you is, were you excited for the Chael Sonnen fights against John Jones, against Rashad, and all those other guys? Were you excited to see him take on the champ?
Yeah, look, that's a good point. I think in that situation, I was excited because Chael Sonnen was filling in the last minute. I believe it was some scenario like that, and I was excited to see that fight, but I wouldn't have been excited if there was someone that was more qualified than Chael Sonnen at that time that I felt deserved that title shot. So I don't mind Chael Sonnen getting the shot against John Jones as long as he's not going in front of someone that should be having the title shot. And I guess in this situation with Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo, I'm one of the rare people that I would have said, hey, give him one of the top guys before you give him to Jose Aldo, because I don't think he deserves the title shot because of his resume. I'm one of the rare people that thinks that he doesn't deserve a shot against Jose Aldo just yet because I don't think that he's done enough. And I think other people deserve a shot in front of it. So in those situations, in a situation where a guy gets a shot in front of someone who I feel deserves it because they've gotten the wins and they actually make sense for the matchup, but they just get pushed because they're talking, that's something that gets me annoyed, and I don't think it's fair in those situations.
Yeah, to me, I feel like the ends justify the means. So we've got this crazy UFC 189 tour. We've got all these classic moments, the belt grab, and we're sitting around, or we were a few weeks ago, like junkies, just waiting for the new UFC Embedded to come out because it was so exciting. And we wouldn't have had that if, say, Frankie Edgar would have been facing Jose Aldo yet again. Now, do I want to see Frankie Edgar fight Jose Aldo? Absolutely, sure. Let's make that fight. Or even Chad Mendes Aldo 3, fine. But they already had their chance. And I think with Conor McGregor, from a business standpoint, and just even from a fan perspective, to me, it's a big question. Who would win, Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor? It's the question that everyone has on their minds. And even when we have guys like Bas Rutten, they can't even pick it. It's not like it's super decisive where it's like, Jose Aldo's going to kick his ass. I mean, this guy has shown a lot of skills in his fighting. So I want to have that fight when it's exciting. Like with Manny Pacquiao and Mayweather. I mean, it's great that the fight's happening, but it's about 5 years too late. I don't want to see Conor McGregor face Jose Aldo in a few years after he maybe loses a few times and then fights his way back to the title. I just think in that timing, Conor McGregor was the perfect guy. Everybody wants to see it, and I like that the UFC usually go, you know what, you guys want to see it, we're going to do that fight. And that's one thing that they do. I'm not a Zuffa zombie or anything like that, but I understand where they're coming from. As far as the credibility, I think honestly MMA lost its credibility a very long time ago. Getting guys in like Brock Lesnar and CM Punk, and I mean there's too many things to mention, but I think MMA has lost its credibility. But the thing is, the only people who realize that are the hardcore fans. The casual fans, they don't understand it and they don't care. And that's the thing, like you take a guy like Mighty Mouse, he's a very, very, very good fighter. It depends what your definition is of being held down. I mean, he's probably not going to be main eventing purely because as you saw with people leaving the arena, the casual fans, they just don't care. And as a business, if you want to survive, they're going to have to make those showcase fights, because otherwise you can take the best guys and fill the cards up with really talented guys like John Fitch and Jake Shields and and Yushin Okami and stuff like that. Yushin Okami was at the top of the division for so long, and they released him because people just weren't that interested in him. I think with MMA, you got to make it as fun as possible. And look, the cream always rises. If you're shit and you get a title shot, and even if you win and you lose it eventually, it's all gonna come out. The truth always comes out. But I just think you got to make those fun fights while you can.
Yeah, but see, here's the problem with that idea. It's like, where do you draw the line? Because, I mean, you mentioned that, and you made some great points that the sport has lost its credibility a long time ago, but I think that it's actually gained a lot of credibility lately. And even though there's all this steroid thing, obviously a lot of people feel like MMA is a sport, but it's just like, where do you draw the line? How do you know, enough is enough? How much control can you give to the fans, and how much do you put into the rankings, and who deserves to fight who? I mean, I absolutely understand your point, but just coming from the whole sports perspective, I just like to see the best guys fight each other, and I just don't want to see guys that don't deserve it get into those spots just because it makes good business sense. Do you know what I mean? I understand it's a business, and I guess I'm just being naive when I say it, but I'd really like to see MMA be looked at as a sport and not a business. And I think a lot of people are starting to see it as a sport. Just sometimes some of those decisions, just business-based decisions, I don't know, they can just really frustrate me sometimes. You know what I mean, Cass?
Yeah. I understand where you're coming from. I think one of the reasons why I disagree is because I can't think of too many times where I've been like, and I slap my knee and I go, damn, I really wanted to see that fight, but God, they put business first, and now we don't get to see it anymore. You know what I mean? Like, so far, the way I see the fights play out and the way I see the matchmaking go out, I'm pretty happy with it. I guess we disagree on, Conor McGregor getting the next title, but like I said, if it wasn't for him getting the next title, we wouldn't be all asking every single guest about the UFC 189 World Tour and things like that. We'd be saying, hey, so Frankie Edgar's fighting again. I mean, great, but we just wouldn't have that same level of excitement. But I understand where you're coming from about drawing the line, and I honestly think that line's been completely pissed on when CM Punk was signed. I think it's look great, whatever. I'm gonna be sitting there, and my popcorn's gonna be shaking so much it's gonna be falling out of the bowl when CM Punk's gonna make his debut. But to me, that and then all the steroid things and just half the elite fighters, and not half, but so many of the elite fighters have popped on steroids. I think as far as credibility goes, man, the sport's got a long way to go. I'm glad they've got the Reebok deal and the Fox deal and things like that really help solidify the brand, and people don't look at it and go, oh, there's some dudes fighting in the backyard, and you got Joe's Fish Shop sponsoring them. You've got real sponsors, you got big companies getting behind them, and that's great. But as far as the real credibility, I think it's going to be quite a few years, maybe 5 or 10 years, before people look at MMA and the UFC and compare it to sports like the NBA or the NFL and things like that.
Yeah, no, look, that's a great point. And look, guys, you give us your opinion. Tell us what you think about MMA and the whole prize fighting aspect. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Obviously, the MMA community has a lot of different views on it, but I agree with you, Cass. A lot of the moves that they made have been exciting. So they haven't made anything wrong just yet. We'll just see how they handle some of the future situations.
Yeah, definitely let us know, guys. If you're checking it out on YouTube, drop some comments down below. If you're listening to us on Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, SoundCloud, I guess jump on YouTube and drop some comments below, or give us a rating on those services. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit us up on Twitter @SubmissionAUS. We always love to hear your thoughts. I've actually got another discussion just bottling up inside me. I want to talk about Paige Van Zandt, but you know what? I think we might save that one for possibly next week. Again, thank you to our guest, Tim Kennedy, the champ, Rafael Dos Anjos, and of course, who could forget, the one and only Brandon Halsey, the Bellator middleweight champion. I'm super happy that we had 2 champions on one episode. And Dennis, of course, I'm going to ask you any last final words for the fans before we finish for another week.
Yeah, man. Well, as people that might know that live in Australia, it was Anzac Day over the weekend, so we just wanted to dedicate this episode to all the Anzacs. Anzac Day is basically like our Memorial Day. So anybody listening out there in America, Canada, around the world who has family that's serving in the Army or served in the Army, thanks for listening. And we dedicate this episode to you. I myself had a grandfather who was the doctor of a tank battalion, pulled out of university at a young age and put into World War II. And Cass, I believe you have a grandfather who was a high-ranking officer in the Polish military. Is that right?
I do, yeah. My grandpa's still good. He's still alive and kicking. No battle scars or anything like that. But yeah, and I don't know what his rank was, but I do have his hat from the army. And anytime anyone from Poland or someone that knows army ranking sees it, they go, "Jesus, he was ranked really high." So, and I think it's a really great point that you bring up, because we go about our days and this and that, and I complain because my steak tastes too steaky and this isn't medium rare and blah blah blah. And then you got to think like, man, some of the things that people go through, and we're just really lucky to have these great lives and be able to sit around, talk about mixed martial arts and have the little things to complain about. Meanwhile, they had real serious shit to complain about. So hats off to all the veterans and everybody who served. And just one more thing before we go, one thing I wanted to mention, I checked out The Ultimate Fighter. I don't really do that much these days. I usually skim through it and see what's happening. Checked out The Ultimate Fighter ATT vs Black Zillions. It's solid. It's good. I like it. And if you haven't already, definitely check that out.
Yeah, that's right. We actually speak to Thiago Silva on our YouTube channel, Submission Radio AU, Submission Radio, youtube.com, Submission Radio AU. It's been a long episode, Cass. Check it out. We've got interviews with him. We've got the technique of the week, some great different techniques. There's a flying, Casper, I believe it's a flying omoplata that we have up there.
There's a flying omoplata. There's an interesting technique that actually the latest one, there's going to be one in about 3 days because it's Sunday now and we're going to have one on Wednesday. But the latest one from last Wednesday was basically when you've got someone in a triangle and they reverse and they step over, how to catch them in a knee bar. Whoa. So we got nice sneaky ones like that. And we're actually going to be doing some filming in the next few days for our next techniques of the week. So I know that some people had questions in the comments on YouTube, so we're going to sort of have a look over those and whatever, jot them down, so when we do see the guys, I'm not even 100% sure who we'll be filming it with, but when we do see the guys, we'll ask them those questions. So if you have any more, definitely drop them below. Again, don't forget to subscribe, and we will catch you guys next week.